What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It is Thursday, October 19th. My name is Everett Delorme. That is Rob St. Clair. And today we are joined by our special guest, Mr. TommyBlizzard, Tommaso Panini from Italy, one of the OG members of the Discord. And today we're going to be breaking down and previewing the 2023-2024 SuperLega men's volleyball season. I'm stoked. It gets started pretty
this weekend.
This weekend with Super Cup coming in at the end of the month. First and foremost, Tommy, how are you doing? How are things? It's good to see you.
Thank you, guys. It's good to see you as well. Things are pretty good, I'd say. And yes, we're all pretty stoked about this upcoming SuperLega season that I think it's going to be pretty interesting. I think the expectations are pretty high, especially with respect to last season and also to what happened during the season with respect to what the expectations were. So yeah, we'll talk about it extensively, but I think that there's going to be some really interesting stuff.
Yeah, for those of you who are brand new to watching the SuperLega, you're picking a very good time to start becoming a fan, because last season those playoffs, those playoffs last season were all-time great, just incredible sports entertainment. So the SuperLega always delivers. I'm excited to preview. Tommy, it's great to see you. Welcome back, my friend. Before we dive into, I mean, a lot of these people probably have also watched our marathon of a Plusliga preview that we did yesterday. This video will go pretty similarly, hopefully not like 2.5 hours, but we asked Adanos a couple questions yesterday about Polish volleyball and about the Plusliga at large, and I kind of want to ask you the same thing. Give me, in your opinion, from inside Italian borders, sort of like a state of the union of Italian volleyball right now, on the men's side at least, like considering the national team performance this summer, the success of the SuperLega last year, what we project to happen in the SuperLega this year, and sort of some of the off the court things going on in Italian volleyball. Let us know any interesting thoughts you have on that subject.
Well, that's a very interesting question, and it's the timing is particularly good because just today there's been it has been released to the press. How can I say it in English? It's sort of a market research, let's call it this way.
Okay.
And they were asking people if you're interested in volleyball, how much is you're interested in volleyball, and what they found out, and this is not just some bogus market research. It's one of the leading institutes in Italy, and it turns out that in the last 5 years, the interest for volleyball in Italy has had a plus 60%. A 60% increase.
Wow.
Yeah. They 5 years ago, there were like 10,400,000 people who reported an interest in volleyball. Now there are 16.5 million people. And I mean, the gap with with soccer, which is, I don't know if you know it, but in Italy, soccer is not just the main sport, but it's like a behemoth. It's a tyrant. It monopolizes the sports conversation. Just to give you an idea, when last year Italy won the volleyball world championship, La Gazzetta dello Sport, which is the most famous and most read sports newspaper in Italy, I think it's the second overall. They put it at page 36, if I remember correctly, after 25 pages of soccer that reported no big matches whatsoever. The first page was a controversy for the video check in a soccer game between Juventus and Salernitana, which is the equivalent of Perugia versus Catania in volleyball. And then they had 6 pages of Formula One when the championship was already not interesting anymore. So, except all that, there is a very vibrant interest in volleyball, and the media scenario changed as well, because last year's World Championship and this year European Championship recorded sky-high records in TV viewership. They went really close to the soccer games. And what I was telling before, 5 years ago, soccer had 3 times the interest of volleyball. They had 30 millions, and the volleyball, I said, it was 10 and something millions. Now it's shrank to less than half. So soccer actually lost like 3%. They're now 29 million something people interested. And now, as I said, volleyball is 16 million and a half. So it's now more than half of soccer. And considering the latest figures, I mean, I think that last time Italy had this much interest in volleyball was back in the 90s, where the Bernardi, Lucchetta, Velasco era, the golden age of Italian volleyball. And that's really interesting also because, as we'll see, the main teams in Superlega are not in very big cities. I mean, Roma doesn't have a team. Milano has a team, but it's arguably not a top tier one. Napoli doesn't have a team. Palermo doesn't have a team. Torino doesn't have a team. So the biggest cities in Italy actually doesn't have a major volleyball team. And so to have that much interest in a sport where most big cities are not represented, it's kind of a huge thing.
That's great to hear. The part about that makes me the most happy is that soccer lost 3% of their fans.
Yeah.
That's outstanding. That sport is the
so
worst,
predictable.
And I hope that they lose much more than that. But that growth in volleyball is fantastic to hear. So, and I mean, I assume from the outside that Italy winning a world championship, Italy coming in second at the European Championship, and an all-time dramatic Scudetto playoff in between have a lot to do with that. Would you agree?
Yeah, probably. Also, I mean, we are here to talk about, of course, the men's league, but the women's team and the women's league improved as well. Of course, this summer that has been the whole Egonu versus Mazzanti thing, and also so that generated quite a lot of buzz. Also because, as you know, Egonu is kind of a polarizing figure. So some people that usually don't comment on volleyball are interested in what's going on with Egonu, even on both sides of the question, I would say, not to go political. So I mean, this of course, I mean, sometimes can gain traction to the movement as well. So I mean, we'll take it.
Yep, Tommy, what's the level of like media coverage within Italy for volleyball? You know, like Rob was saying, last year's SuperLega playoffs were incredible, so much drama. How much of that is passed on to the average Italian fan and the average Italian citizen? You know, like someone who, you know, I don't even know. I don't know if you guys have morning sports shows. That's something that's big here in North America. You wake up, you turn on the TV, and there's morning sports. Volleyball would never ever make that unless there's like some incredible play and they get to slip it. So how much awareness is there from the general public when there's big things happening in the volleyball world, specifically in SuperLega, not so much in international volleyball?
Like when Perugia goes 22-0 and gets upset in the first round.
Yeah. Well, it's difficult to say because if you look at let's call it traditional media, so TV and newspaper, SuperLega and volleyball in general is still kind of marginalized, as I said before. We don't have usually morning sports TV shows because most people in the morning are working, so there's not much of an audience. They're usually more concentrated in the evening. And as I said before, they are soccer dominated. But despite that, I mean, with Rai broadcasting the games on their channels for free as long as you're in Italian territory, this gives a much broad audience and people who don't find enough space on traditional media like TV or printed press can go online. There's lots of volleyball websites, volleyball blogs. There's also like sports web portals that give a lot of space to other sports, because of course there's more than enough offer of soccer in other portals and in other media. So on the internet, I mean, on Facebook, on the blogosphere, there's quite a lot of buzz actually, but and that's, I think, one of the reasons that this gaining traction, because we are living in an era, at least in Italy, where traditional media are followed basically by older person. Most young people don't even have a TV, or if they do, they just use it for Netflix or streaming, or using PlayStation or something. They don't watch the general channels anymore. They don't watch, or if they do, just for like maybe just reality shows. I still have some traction, but news and general entertainment, just old people are watching it. And so volleyball has quite a young audience, and young audience try to follow it on the web, basically. So social media, on blogs, on web portals, whatever. So it's difficult to quantify, of course, because you don't have copies sold of how many viewers that the TV channel had. But the survey that I quoted before it speaks pretty clearly. Volleyball is gaining traction, and hopefully it will continue to gain traction.
Great news. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's probably a common theme across every country in the way that people are consuming media. And I do think that volleyball in general has a younger audience, and that the younger audience is going to consume it in ways that aren't traditional TV and print media. So that is good to hear in Italy, and that those numbers of growth are fantastic. So I think we should jump into talking about the SuperLega, because it starts this weekend, and it's going to run for a very long time, up until April at the very least, and it's going to be playing constantly. Everett and I are going to be talking about it constantly on the 9x9 all year. One more question for you, Tommy. I asked Pavel the same thing yesterday. Is the SuperLega still the best men's league in the world?
I guess it depends on your definition of best league in the world. Is it the one with the best players? Is it the one when there is the less difference between top teams and the bottom teams? Is it the one where mid-table teams could have a shot at other championship top tier teams? It's difficult to have a definition. I mean, on one side, I think if you look at the individual value of each player, you do something like the FIFA cards, you give them a 0 to 100 score, and you sum them up. In that sense, probably Italy gets the highest score in all other championship. But if you look at the recent edition of Champions League, Italian teams didn't do so well, and that should be something that you to consider. I mean, if Poland dominated the recent edition of Champions League, and that's something you can't ignore. So I would say that if they're not the best, I mean, they're up there with Poland. I think Italy and Poland have no contenders, and whether Italy is better than Poland, I think it's arguable, and everyone may have a different question based on the different parameters you put in the equation.
That's a fair answer. Very, very fair answer. And Pavel yesterday said something pretty similar about the Plusliga. They're both outstanding, and they're both very much worthy of watching if you're a volleyball fan, I think is definitely fair to say. So let's talk about how this thing works. The format is decently similar to the Plusliga that we talked about yesterday. It is still a double round robin regular season format where each team plays every other team in the league twice each. The difference is that in Italy there are only 12 teams, whereas in the Plusliga there are 16, and 16 is ridiculous. That creates a 30-match regular season. It is much more manageable 22-match regular season. So you play your team plays the 11 other teams in the league once each, once home and once away. Top 8 teams out of this 12 at the end of the 22-match regular season. The playoffs, the team who finishes in 12th gets relegated to the A2 division, and then the playoffs. Last year, if I'm correct, was the first time that we had best of 5 match series for all 3 rounds.
Yeah.
And good thing too, because that quarterfinal round, 3 of the 4 series went the distance. 3 of the 4 series went to 5 matches, and the other one went to 4. And it was an all-time great playoffs last year, and I'm very happy that they're sticking with the series format, unlike the PlusLiga, like we talked about yesterday. If you finish top 3 in the playoffs, not in the regular season, but in the playoffs, including the 3rd place series, top 3 teams qualify for the following year's CEV Champions League. And then we also have the additional events like a lot of other leagues in Europe. We've got the Super Cup at the beginning of the season, which in Italy is a 4-team event that is, I think, next weekend, like October 31st and November 1st. And then there's the Coppa Italia, the men's Italian Cup, sort of in the middle of the season. And Tommy, the last thing that's so important to make very clear, can you tell us the situation with the Italian quota, what the regulations are for Italian players in the lineup in the SuperLega and all domestic competitions?
They changed slightly this year. I mean, what you put in your slide is correct. You must have 3 Italian players on the court all the time. But right now they changed the libero rule, because before, if you had like an Italian libero and a foreign libero, the libero counted as a foreigner. Right now, they changed the rule, and it's actually 3 Italians out of 6. I mean, the 6 on the court, there have to be 3 Italians. So if you have an Italian libero and a foreigner libero, that changes depending on which libero is on the court. So if you have a foreign libero, the other 5 players, 3 of them must be Italian. If you have an Italian libero, of course, just 2 of them. But yeah, the simplified rule is the 6 players on the court, 3 of them at least must be Italian.
Okay, that is a little bit different from previous years, because in the past it was just about who your starting 7 was. So in that case, like having 1 Italian middle blocker isn't necessarily enough, because in the rotations when that middle blocker is not on the court, you might run into some problems. That's a pretty big change.
Yeah, it's pretty limited actually, because if you look at the rosters, there have been very, very few foreign liberos. And the funny thing is, there is a team that is now in a bit of a problem, because apparently, and I just found out about it yesterday, you can't have 2 foreign liberos on your rosters.
Really?
And turns out Padova has 2 foreign liberos. The only 2 foreign liberos in the whole league are both in Padova. And so right now they're in a bit of a trouble. But yeah, I just found out about it yesterday.
Wow. Okay. That actually was the first team that came to mind when I was thinking about that being a problem, because they have a foreign libero in Julian Zenger, and I guess they have this Japanese guy who's backing him up, right? So
Taniguchi.
Yeah,
okay. So we'll talk about that. That's very interesting. We'll have to talk about that when we talk about Padova, but that's important to point out. And as we go through all of our team slides, I have the players highlighted in blue who are Italian, or who at least count as being Italian for the purposes of the SuperLega, because more often Soleil and like Santiago Orduna is a good example, and of course Daddy Stankovic is a good example, and like
Aiden
Zingel is a great example. There's a lot of I think more often than in most other leagues that I know of do we see people renationalizing to not count against the foreigner limit in the SuperLega. So we'll talk about that. One thing that's important for you all is how, if you want to watch the SuperLega, how to do that. Fortunately, it's much easier worldwide than the PlusLiga, like we talked about yesterday. Every match of the entire season is live and on demand on Volleyball World TV. So that's nice. It's been the case for, I think this will be the 3rd season of having every SuperLega and every Lega Volley Femminile match on Volleyball World TV with English commentary. So that's great. You can pick up a subscription to that. It is in any country. If you're in Italy, you probably have other ways to watch it anyway, like on Rai and on the TV channels, like Tommy said. But worldwide, Volleyball World TV is your best bet. Unfortunately, their quality of commentary continues to drop on the English side, but that's another conversation entirely. Fortunately, though, if you want to watch the games, there's one easy way to do so worldwide. Don't need a VPN, don't need anything like that.
It makes you feel any better. Italian commentary is not that better. I had never heard a game with English commentary, but the Italian commentary is given to the home team's journalists. So you have a very strong regional accent and a very partisan commentary, and it's not the best for neutral spectators.
What about Lucetta?
Oh, that's right. That's a different thing. I was talking about volleyball TV. Lucchetta is, I'd say, pretty divisive figure because he tries his best to be funny, and he does a lot of jokes. Some people like it, some other people don't, and sometimes he likes to put in the controversial opinion just to
stir the pot.
Exactly, but it's up to you. Some people like him, some people don't. I really don't like him so much, but it's funny.
Okay, fair enough. I like hearing him. Not that I know at all what he's saying.
All right. The last thing I think it's important to show before we talk about each team, and I already showed this briefly earlier, is the map. I think it's important to point out geography and the way that the geography influences travel and the schedule of the league and all sorts of different things. And what we have this year, what I've always noticed about the map of the Superlega is how northern dominant it is. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until a couple years ago that we had any team south of Rome. Unless you include Latina or Cisterna, they're basically in the Roman suburbs. But when Taranto got promoted down there, like sort of in the heel of the boot, this is now their third year in the Superlega. And now, for the first time, at least in my memory, I've never seen a Sicilian team in the Superlega before, and now we have Catania all the way down there. So I honestly
wasn't Vibo down in Sicily?
Vibo's not in Sicily. It's kind of
in Calabria, which is in the top of the. It's actually a little bit north of Catania, where you see the little streak of sea that divides Sicilia from Calabria. That's pretty much where Vibo is.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're on the west coast of the country, south of Rome. But is Vibo Valentia north or south of Naples, Tommy?
No, way south. It's I said it's in the Calabria region, which is in the point. If you look at Italy as a boot, Taranto is the heel, and Vibo is pretty much the point. Calabria is the point.
The toe. Got it.
Toe, exactly.
So, however, even though we have a Sicilian team now and we have Taranto there in the heel, it's still very northern dominated. Tommy, in your opinion, what role does this map, what role does geography play on the league as a whole?
It's this map. I'm laughing because this map could very well go on a Facebook page called "Literally Every Map About Italy." Because if you look at soccer, if you look at basketball, if you look at all major team sports, you're gonna find a very similar chart. Last year's the Napoli won the Scudetto in soccer, but it was an exception. Most of the Scudettos have been won by a team based in Milano or in Torino, which are in the deep north. And the reason is fairly simple. The north of Italy is much richer and developed than the south of Italy. There is a pretty big difference in economic development, in how easy it is to have a business. It's quite a bit. It's a very big difference in it. It's been like that for since Italy became a nation in the last 150 years. And it's of course a very hot political topic. It's always been, but the fact is that the wealth of Italy is mostly concentrated in the north or the center north, and that of course translates in this bigger economic firepower translates in easier time if you want to buy a team, manage a team, and that of course requires money, even if in volleyball, even if you don't have the economy of soccer, it still requires quite a lot of money to run. So that's the reason. And for your second question, yeah, of course, you have most teams, and probably not necessarily the best teams, because you see Perugia and Civitanova are in the center of Italy, actually not in the deep north. But there's a lot of fans always in the Lazio region, the one where Roma and Cisterna is. And don't ever say to a guy from Latino Cisterna that is in a suburb of Rome, he will get very angry. But for the sake of simplicity, we can say that. And I mean, even in the deep south, there are very few teams, but there is a very hardcore passion. Like we mentioned, Vibo always had quite a good following in the region. And every time the national team plays games in southern Italy, lots of people turn up. I mean, this doesn't necessarily reflect the map of the passion of volleyball. The viewership is quite spread, but the concentration of the teams is pretty clear, and it's useful to the night.
Yeah, and it's economic rather than popularity or fandom. Yeah. That's good context. So we brought up Vibo Valencia several times, and because they've been in and out of the SuperLega, they got promoted, they got relegated a couple years ago. This leads us to talking about the teams. And the first team we need to talk about is Catania, the new team to the SuperLega this year out of Sicily. This is the second year in a row now that the new team to the SuperLega is not the team that won the A2 division the previous year. I am still confused by what the heck Catania is doing in the SuperLega, because Vibo Valencia won the A2 division last year. And then, as we reported on the 9x9, as far as I remember, as soon as they won that title, they basically folded and ceased volleyball operations. And I have no idea what the scramble was like to find a new team to join the SuperLega. And it turned out they settled on this Farm Italia Saturnia Catania club that won the A3 division last year. So, Tommy, help me out here. How did this all happen? What the heck is a team doing, jumping from A3, skipping A2 entirely, and going straight to the SuperLega? How did this all happen?
Welcome to non-soccer leagues in Italy. I mean, we have a similar, even if not that hardcore, let's say, situation in basketball as well. I mean, not like that, not people like getting promoted and refusing promotion. It's a little bit more stable in basketball, but the fact is there are very different economics between the top tier league and the lower league ones. So you can manage to have a very, very decent team in Serie A2, in A2. And like Vibo did, they built a pretty good team without that much spending. But when it comes to SuperLega, that's a whole different story. I mean, the economics of SuperLega are very much higher. And so it's still puzzling because Vibo knew it. They've been with the same management, the same ownership in SuperLega for lots of years, even in the previous decades. And so why do you build a team to aim for promotion, a team that actually gains promotion, and then you find out, oh, well, we actually got promoted. We don't have the money to do SuperLega. Never mind. We go back to whatever we go. Yeah, it's still it's puzzling to me as well, because sometimes there are teams who just find themselves to get promoted. They maybe aimed for a mid-table A2 championship, and they found them in the promotion final. But that's not Vibo's case. So I don't know what went through Mr. Calipo's mind, who is the owner of Vibo Valencia's volleyball team. But they did so. So what happened next is, okay, the second place team, they asked, okay, you want to take Vibo's place? And everyone said, no, thank you. So Vibo basically said, okay, we are offering our rights to participate to SuperLega to the best offerer. And I guess the only offer that came up, or pretty much the only offer, was Saturnia Catania from A3. And here we are with Catania in SuperLega.
That is crazy.
But you should be happy, Rob, because I know how much you missed Ravenna from a couple of years ago, and that's going to be the closest thing we have to Ravenna in recent years. So maybe not as bad as that Ravenna, but
nobody could be as bad as like that. That 2022 Ravenna team was horrible.
Yeah, it was
horrible.
At least this team has like some somewhat known names and some guys who can do some things. It's kind of just like it's a pile of the leftovers. It truly is, from Santiago, like Luka Basic, Orduna, Buchkeger, Masulovic, like all guys who have played in league, all guys who know what's up, but they're just kind of like left without a contract. When you look at their roster, it's just like they picked up like 4 guys from that Vibo team, including I guess Orduna and Buchkeger, but like, this is just like a leftover team. That's all it is. It's the day after Thanksgiving, and you're just kind of going through the fridge to see what's left, you know.
So the way I like to always frame when we talk about teams who newly get promoted to the top division is their goal obviously is to stay there. A couple of years ago, Taranto got promoted. So far, they have succeeded in staying there. Vibo Valencia has gone back and forth. We already talked about them. What do you think, Tommy, on the court? How would you rate Catania's chances of staying in the SuperLega next year?
I'd give them a generous 5%. I mean, the team is really bad compared to the other teams. Again, it's not Ravenna bad. Maybe they'll win 1 game, 2 games if they're lucky, but I really don't see them avoiding relegation. They are too much worse than the others.
Even worse than Padova?
Yeah. Sure.
Padova's bad, and it sounds like they're going to have problems with that rule that Tommy mentioned about foreign liberos. But I tend to agree. I don't see there being a team on this list worse than this particular roster here. And Tommy, with that rule about now you need 6, like of the 6 players on the court, 3 must be Italian. What's going to happen with Catania and their middle blocker situation? Because they have Orduna now counts as Italian, even though he was born in Argentina. He's counted as Italian for a while now. And then they have an Italian libero and 1 Italian middle. What about the rotations when Mashulovic is the middle blocker? Are they going to have a problem there?
No. Okay, that's a good point. I think actually the rule is still about 3 out of 7. But what counts as libero is I think the last one who played, something like that. So if Cavaccini is the libero, he goes out for the middle to serve. It's okay. It counts as an Italian. I didn't think about that, but that's a fair point.
Okay. So this starting lineup, as they have it here, with 3 foreign wings and 1 foreign middle blocker. This complies with the rules.
Yeah.
Okay. Luka Basic and Mohamed Manavi from Iran, and like Paul Buchegger from Austria is a name I haven't thought about in like a decade, and like this team just doesn't do it for me. And they do have Luigi Randazzo coming off the bench, who, as far as I know, is one of the great busts of a highly touted prospect, maybe ever. And
I remember when he was like a big deal playing for Ravenna back when they were big.
He's not alone, but he was a pretty big bust.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I don't see this Catania team surviving relegation. I personally don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all agree on that. I mean, it's going to be a nice chance for Basic, which I mean, he's clearly not a top outside hitter. But last year, I was checking last year's statistics. In regular season, he was actually the 5th best hitter for killing efficiency among those with 80 spikes or more. So he's going to have a nice chance to prove himself now that he will be, of course, a regular starter. And I think it's going to be a very important season for him to show that last year was not just an accident, and to try to get a contract with a higher ambition team.
Yeah, Luka Basic, I actually don't hate his game. I kind of like his play style. He came off the bench a little bit for Piacenza last year, And like Tommy said, he put up some decent numbers. He was he came off the bench as well the year Vibo Valencia got relegated, didn't they? Like 2 seasons ago?
Probably.
So sure, like I hope that he has a good year. I do like Nemanja Masulovic, the Serbian guy in the middle. I think he's pretty good. But past that, Santiago Orduna seems to me to be like the go-to setter for the newly promoted team to try and not get relegated. And his success on helping teams to not get relegated is like maybe 50% at best. Past like when he was setting for Modena back in the day. So I don't really see it for this Catania team. Do you guys have any more thoughts on them, or can we probably move it along?
Let's
just one quick thing that remember that Cesar Douglas Silva was not supposed the coach of the team. They fired the coach before the season started. Their head coach was supposed to be Waldo Cantor, and he was sacked like a couple of weeks ago, I think.
Oh wow!
Yeah, maybe less. Just let me check. 1 week ago, he was sacked, and now this new coach took over. But so, I mean, it seems like there's a kind of a dysfunctional management as well. So things are very, very dark for Catania.
Okay, yikes. Well, that I assume would be pretty good news for the rest of the lower table teams that are trying not to get relegated. Let's move on to Taranto. The other team down in the southern part of the country. They survived relegation last year by 1 point. They beat out Siena by 1 point in the standings. And they actually made some moves that I really like, particularly because I'm American. They've picked up both Kyle Russell and Jeff Jendrick, both of whom I love. They picked up Angel Trinidad from Spain, who I think is certainly a SuperLega caliber setter. They got Jose Miguel Suarez or Gutierrez Suarez, all those Cubans. I know for a fact that Ronnie Cuban Spike is watching right now, and because he was making fun of Tommy earlier. Ronnie, tell me why all of your really all Latin American players have way too many names, and I don't know what to call them. I'm gonna complain at Ronnie for that one. But Suarez is good. We saw him. Everett and I saw him at Norsica, and I think that he's legit. We have the ghost of Filippo Lanza supposedly taking a starting spot on this team.
The ghost of.
He's still good looking, but that's just in photos, not on the court or on the stat sheet, at least in my opinion. So, Tommy, tell us about Taranto. Sure that they probably have a good chance of staying in the league just because of Catania's situation, but what would you say Toronto's ceiling is? Do you think there's any way they push for a playoff spot?
I would say unlikely, but who knows? I mean, you mentioned the fact that they signed Russell and Jendrick, and it's good because I think last year there was not a single American in SuperLega.
Zero, except unless you count Gabi Garcia. He was the only one.
Yeah, so I mean, there's Americans have always been a pretty strong component here in SuperLega, so we are glad to have them back, at least a few of them. And I mean, yeah, they're good players, Russell and Jendrick. I don't know if they're enough to be in the top 8. As you mentioned, Lanza back is good news for all the ladies and the gay guys and whoever likes guys. But yeah, I mean, he's a bit washed up. I mean,
he's more than a bit washed up.
Yeah.
He's very washed up. I remember when he played for Perugia a couple years ago in Leon's first year there, Lanza was so useless at attacking on the left side that they wouldn't even set him there. They would instead set Leon out of the left back position. And that was a better option than setting Lanza.
The Lanza A ball, just there to pass balls and play defense.
Ridiculous. So
and he's not even that great of a passer, so
however, they do have 2 legitimate arms on the wings. Like Jose Miguel Gutierrez Suarez has a cannon, and he's really dynamic, and he can actually legitimately score some points. And Everett and I have been clamoring for years to see more of Kyle Russell as the legitimate opposite, or as a legitimate opposite on the United States national team. So that dude can score as well. And Jendrick is legitimately a world-class middle. So I do kind of like this team. I like Imoni Aletti having been there forever and kind of being the the veteran and probably the captain, if I had to guess. And I think Angel Trinidad is a pretty good setter. I just don't know if they can make the playoffs because of who's ahead of them. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think this is a playoff team either. I think this is a team that like can surprise some better teams on an off night, but at the end of the day, I don't think this is a team that's really scaring anyone. You're right. I like them. I think Russell is going to have some good looks and have some good games, but they're going to be really weak on the left side.
Yeah, I agree.
I do think this is a good, a great year and an opportunity for Kyle Russell's career. I'm really rooting for him. I just hope that he has a decent statistical season. I also agree. I wouldn't pick Taranto to go to the playoffs. Anything else about this team, or can we move on?
Let's move it. Keep it moving.
Yeah,
let's do it. Up next is Padova. We've brought them up a couple times now because it seems that they're in quite the pickle with the foreign libero situation, but even not considering that, the lineup that they've put together this year is similar enough to last year. They bring in Marco Falaschi to set, who I think is an upgrade. They lose Ron Takahashi, which is now they're going to have to play Davide Gardini, which is a huge downgrade. And they get Gabi Garcia Fernandez instead of Dusan Petkovic, which anybody over Petkovic is going to be an upgrade. They also get Fabian Plak in the middle, who I actually think is kind of good. And we can talk about their libero situation later, but Tommy, first of all, what do you think about the rest of this projected starting lineup for Padova, not including the liberos? You think this team can be competitive, or are they going to be 7-15 last year? Is that about where you think they're going to be this year again?
Well, what I say is never underestimate Padova. Padova has something in. I don't know if it's the organization, their coaches, even. After the last coach went in, then this Cottini guy took over. They know how to overperform. Their rosters never look particularly good on paper, but maybe last year they did. I think they were third to last with 3 points over Siena, something like that. So last year didn't go particularly well, but they somehow always managed to do some kind of overperforming. So, of course, this is not a playoff team. No chances about that. No. But I think they could do a bit better than Taranto. I think there's a lot of players who are willing to, were looking forward to prove themselves. Of course, the first name that comes to mind is Gabi Garcia Fernandez. I think after being basically in the shadow of Zaitsev in Civitanova Marche, he will have the chance of being the undisputed starter, and he will be eager to prove himself, to prove that he belongs to a Superlega basically. Then they have Desmet, who had some really nice games, especially at the beginning of last season. And then he kind of lost himself. He was kind of inconsistent, but he showed some things. And this year he will try to be more consistent. And of course, Gardini, who never had that much space. And he's not regarded as a national team material or something, but he's going to be eager as well to show that, hey, I'm not here just because I went to college in the United States or something.
Or because my father is a legend.
Yeah, of course. We'll also see about Falaschi. Falaschi did an excellent championship, excellent Superlega 2 seasons ago. He was really wonderful. Last year, not so much. He's getting old as well. But in an environment like Padova, where there is very few pressure, and he knows that he has a room for error, that nobody will care if they do an hour and a shower versus Perugia. Nobody cares. The important thing is to stay in Superlega, and with Catania, it's not going to be much of a challenge. But I hear their management are pretty confident. They had the team presentation, I think yesterday or even today, and the management say, we can. I wouldn't be that surprised if we make the playoffs. I would be surprised if they make the playoffs, but if they're
I would too.
If they are that confident, maybe they know something we don't, or maybe they're just trying to be overcompensating or stuff.
Do we think the link up of Gardini and Gabby, like that BYU connection, can it create some magic here? I don't personally see it. I think that's a huge hole, having Gardini on the left side like that.
My question about Gardini is, how soon, or like, if you are Davide Gardini, do you feel like young Luca Porro, Paolo Porro's little brother, who is supposed to be a superstar level outside hitter prospect, do you feel like this kid is nipping at your heels off the bench? Like, how at what point in the year might we see a Gardini who struggles to pass the ball, which is by far his chief weakness? Do we see him being replaced by Luca Porro at some point?
Yeah, it will happen. I mean, if anything, because as you said, this guy is a very hot prospect. So I think Coutinho will put him in even just for a couple of rallies to test him. And it's all about who has the bigger balls, if you can allow me that, because SuperLega is a pretty unforgiving championship. So I just talked about the fact that you don't have that much pressure in Padova, but as a player, if you are Gardini, as you said, you know that there is this wonder kid behind you that is just waiting for you to fail and to have a couple of bad games to take over for you. And at the same time, if you are Porro, you know that people know your name, just not only because you have a more famous brother and another less famous brother who is probably gonna come up as well. He just won the under 17 European Championship or something. I mean, there's a third Porro coming up, but it's
third one. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh no.
It's way too early. He's like 17 or something, but he seems to be a good player as well, a good prospect as well. But as I was saying, if you're Luca Porro, you know that when you go on the court, people will know pretty much who you are. They will know that you have a lot of potential. So I mean, Italy is not in pretty much all sports league is not famous for having that much of a patience. So even if you're regarded as a prospect at the first couple of games, you don't do well, people start mumbling, people start whispering overrated. So as a team, they may not have that much pressure, but as single players, some of them like Gardini and Porro may very well have a lot of pressure. So it's all about who has the biggest shoulders, who will crumble under the pressure the less, or who will be able to withstand the pressure the most.
That's a fantastic point. I think that goes for the entirety of the SuperLega, really, and just to think about the expectations of that team versus the expectation of some players. And you use the word unforgiving, Tommy, which I couldn't agree more. I think that's a perfect word to describe the SuperLega. And you also mentioned the opportunity for Gabi Garcia Fernandez. I especially have vested interest in his success or lack thereof this year, because as some people probably know, Gabi Garcia Fernandez will be eligible to play for the United States national team in March of next year. And there have been huge questions about the United States' second opposite behind Matt Anderson. And I personally have been of the take that spot will be Gabi's when he is eligible, if he has a good enough season this year.
Yeah, he's got to prove himself here.
As the undisputed starter, like Tommy said, he's got to have a good individual year. I do not care at all how good of a team Padova is. I am completely watching the statistics of Gabi Garcia week in and week out.
Yeah, 100%. This is very much like he had such a great first year. Last year, he wasn't really used all that much. This is really his opportunity to go out there and prove that he can be a guy at this level. And to be honest, if he doesn't perform here in the SuperLega, then you're just back at square one for Team USA, right? Like then he's just another guy. So this is a massive year for Gabi Garcia Fernandez. Maybe the biggest of his career.
Has to be.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Anything else about Padova? Well, I guess we should talk about the libero thing a little bit more. They do have 2 foreign liberos. Tommy, what are the what's their situation right now? What are they going to have to do to fix this problem?
It's quite of a problem also because I don't know what the issue with the Taniguchi was, but Zenger was questionable until like today or yesterday. I mean, he was just green lighted to play again and very recently. So Padova was in a very difficult situation. They will probably call like a guy from the youth team to pose as the second libero just to comply with the rules.
I see a guy on the roster on the Lega Volley website, Davide Luigi Russo, a 2001 libero. So don't know anything about him.
Yeah, but he's the guy. They signed him, but he just he broke his contract. I mean, he renounced his contract with Padova for personal reasons, and we don't know much more about it. He had a very nice A2 season in Porto Vero, and he was actually regarded as an interesting prospect. But then just a couple of weeks after he signed, he said, "Sorry guys, I can't do it," and the reasons has not been disclosed. We just know a general personal reasons, but he's not on the roster anymore.
Okay. So yeah, they're going to have to. So what would be the consequences for them, like from the league, if they do not have any Italian liberos on the entire roster? Like, would they even be able to play this weekend, or would they be like penalized points or sets, or like how does that work?
I don't know what's the penalty for that, but I think it's not going to happen. As I said, they will probably just call up some guy from the youth team. Also, Padova is a pretty decent youth facilities,
right?
So they will just call up the under 19 libero, just go to the roster and play with Zenger, and nothing will happen.
Okay. So we'll keep an eye on that if anything significant comes from it. But yeah, I doubt it. I don't expect Padova to be in the playoff picture. But yeah, I am interested to see what happens with a couple of those individual players. Are we ready to move on? One more team that did not make the playoffs last year, and that is Cisterna. So Cisterna 8-14 last year, finishing 9th. They had a very good start to the season, mostly riding Petar Zirlic for everything he was worth, and he was brilliant, one of the best statistical opposites in the league. They fell off in a big way late. Zirlic is no longer there. He will be playing in Milano, so they've had to go. And once again, it always seems to me like Cisterna is kind of scrambling at the last minute to fill a roster. This is a little bit more complete than previous years. I mean, last year was a mess. But I don't hate this team. I don't hate the way this team is constructed. You keep F.A. Byram at outside, who I like. You bring in Teo 4 from the French league, who I really like. Mazzone has been around the league forever. He's a perfectly serviceable Italian middle. Piccinelli is a very good libero that I'm excited to see get a chance to start. Saita is hot and cold. I think he kind of fits pretty well for a team like Cisterna. Nedeljkovic is a fine middle, and I know nothing about this Farragut guy from Spain. So, Tommy, what do you think about Cisterna? How would you project their season to go?
Well, I honestly don't know much more about Cisterna than you. I can tell you that they made quite a big revolution. I mean, they changed the coach. Among the starters, I think Byram is the only one that was there even last year. Yeah. So they changed 6 starters out of 7, and they also have again a new coach. They don't have, as you mentioned, Petar Dirlic anymore, which is a huge loss. And I don't know much about this Foray opposite, this Foray guy. Will he be another Dirlic, another guy who can score consistently? I don't know, honestly. I don't know anything about him. But I think their main weakness is that. I mean, they have to find somebody who scores points, because the loss of Dirlic is pretty important. I agree that Nedeljkovic is a pretty good middle. I'm not that high about Mazzone. I mean, last year in he had a good start in Siena. Actually, he was posting up some very interesting numbers. Then he kind of fell with all the team. I mean, Mazzone has been around quite a while. I think he's well more than 30 years old, and it's sort of the Lanza of the middles, maybe. I mean, he had.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a point in which he was the national team starting middle at the 2018 World Championship. He was starting with Anzani. And then in the last seasons in Modena, he was starting to be much less of a factor, especially on blocking. And then he went to Siena, looking to restart his career. That didn't go so well. I don't know if I'm telling you, I wouldn't be that much surprised if at a certain point Rossi, which is a solid middle, is for a lower tier team, will actually start over him, because at least he's reliable.
Wow.
I mean, Mazzone sometimes exits out of the game mentally. You look at him, he's not on time on attack. He fails to block consistently. Sometimes he just exits out of the game, and I think it's more a mental than a technical problem.
Okay.
And then we will see also about this Ramon Ferragut guy. That same thing with Foray. I don't know anything about him, and it's going to be either very good or either very bad for Cisterna.
We have some people in the chat right now talking about Ferragut, because I've never seen him. People are saying he's a very good server, and basically nothing else. And that is not what you want to hear about an outside hitter who might have to start for you. But they also have Pavle Peric, the Serbian guy who played in, I think, Fenerbahce last year, who I think is pretty good, but is probably is similar in play style to that. Also not a great receiver, just kind of a bigger, more scoring type of guy. F.A. Byram is obviously their most well-rounded outside hitter, but he's had his own health concerns. So I'm interested to see that as well. Mazzone versus Rossi, I think it's a toss-up. I don't think that makes that much of a difference which one of them starts in the middle. Honestly, I see this being another about a 9th place finishing team. In my opinion, the top, there's a pretty clear drop off after the 8, and it actually happens to be the 8 that made the playoffs last year, to the 3 that did not make the playoffs last year, and then you have Catania at the bottom. Like, unfortunately, I don't foresee there being a whole lot of drama in either the playoff race or the relegation race.
Yeah, probably not. Unless there's something like apocalyptic, I would agree with you. I mean, last year wasn't that much of a difference. If you look at last year regular season standings, there was Perugia, then there were like 7 or 8 teams in a matter of 15 points, something like that, or less than 20 points.
I'm looking at it right now. 2 through 8 was 14 points separated. I remember the middle of the standings were that was where the craziness was last year. That was where all the drama came.
Yeah, then there was Cisterna, which was not that far away. It was like 4 points away from Milano, and then there were last 3 teams had like 10 points from from Cisterna, something like that. I mean,
right.
So it's going to be a similar scenario, but maybe with the scrambled teams.
And well, fortunately for us, the drama then came once we got into the playoffs, which we'll certainly talk about. On that note, anything else about Cisterna? Everett, you got anything about this team, or can we move on to the playoff teams?
Honestly, I kind of like this team. I don't know if they're going to have the same impact as last year's team and have the same effect as everyone else. You just got it's just a team at a different point, right? Last year, a lot of older guys. Now it's a lot of younger guys. But I'm excited to see Tofal go at it. I mean, I think he's going from Montpellier to starting in PlusLiga, or not PlusLiga. I'm stuck in yesterday. The SuperLega is a big jump, but I guess we'll see if he's up to it. I'm really excited to see F.A. Byram and to see if he can make something of it. And also Pavle Peric on the bench. I'm guessing he's going to be one of those first guys off. Rob and I both, you and I both liked him playing for Bulgaria last summer in the VNL. So I'm excited. No,
for
Serbia for the in the VNL. So I'm excited to see if he can kind of push something. I think there's a lot of guys with something to prove on this team, and I kind of like that.
I agree with that. Yeah, and it's kind of the same Cisterna identity from the last couple of years. They've been maybe the least relevant team in kind of everyone's minds coming into the season, because nobody ever thinks they're going to get relegated, but also nobody ever thinks that they're going to do a lot of damage. And I think part of that is because they seem to sort of put things together at the last second as far as preparing for seasons go. But then they end up punching above their weight class a little bit, especially last year with Dierlich, who was unbelievable, like one of the great like diamond in the rough finds in recent SuperLega history, in my opinion. But I agree with Tommy that replacing him is going to be really, really hard. I like Teoforo as a prospect. He can't be Petar Dierlich. I don't think he can produce at that level.
Yeah.
All right. I think we should move on to last year's playoff teams. And this is where it starts to get interesting. So the way I have them ordered is by both where they finished in the regular season and at what round they exited the main part of the playoffs, because I do not care about any of that playoff placement garbage where you like play 9 through 11 and then you play 5 through 9 and then you can give someone a participation trophy for finishing in 5th. I don't care about any of that. I'm talking about when they bowed out of the actual playoffs. And we're starting off with Vero Volley Monza, who was a good team last year. They finished 11th, 11 and 11, 7th in the regular season. They lost 3-1 to Trentino in the quarterfinal series. And they did all of that, pretty much all of that, without who they thought was going to be their starting setter in Cachopa, because he hurt his knee in the preseason. They went out and got Jan Zimmerman at the last minute, and they still made the playoffs pretty comfortably. And they are a similar team to last year. The notable loss is Georg Grozer, who has been the talk of the town the last couple of weeks. His unreal performance for the German national team. They now have 2 legit options at opposite. They have Arthur Schwartz, who Everett obviously knows, and Ibrahim Lawani, who joined Toronto halfway through last year. I honestly don't know which of those guys is going to start. They also have 3 very capable outside hitters. Stephen Marr was one of the best outsides in the league last year. Ron Takahashi comes over, and Eric Lepke comes over. I'm not sure which 2 are going to start. They have the same 2 middles from last year, the same 2 Italian guys, Tomas Beretta off the bench, and they bring in Marco Gaggini from Verona. Whatever, that doesn't move the needle. But before we talk about which of the wings we expect to start, Tommy, can you walk us through the last couple days, the news cycle or the apparent news cycle that didn't turn out to be true about some last minute moves supposedly in this Monza team?
Yeah, it was really crazy. I mean, out of the blue, a usually reliable website like volleyball.it came out with the news that Stephen Marr has been signed by Zenit St. Petersburg to replace Matt Anderson, who in turn went to Turkey to Ziraat Ankara, I think.
Right.
And that Monza, to replace Marr, signed Mirza Lagumja, so Adis Lagumja's brother. And it turned out it was a fake news. I mean, Monza had a team presentation recently, and both the coach and the management, the ownership said, no, it's Marr. Not only Marr is gonna stay in Monza, but he's going to be our leader. So they have pretty high expectations from him, and I think it's fair because Marr played very well in his recent season. He has been, along with Grozer, of course, Monza's leader. And yes, so there was this whole bunch of news that turned out to be fake, even if it looks like that Lagumja to Monza can still happen midway through the season. And yeah, about the news, that's pretty much it.
That was so interesting because I think that the Discord was exploding with that headline. It was like 2 days ago. It was on Tuesday, I'm pretty sure, that Marr was apparently going to go to Zenit St. Petersburg and Mirza Lagumja was going to come replace him at Monza. And then it turns out just absolutely none of that was true. And like Everett was pointing out before the show, that came from volleyball.it is a very reputable source. So I have no idea where that came from and how that turned out to be just so wrong on such a pretty reputable site. But it turns out that Steven Marr absolutely is staying with Monza. They played a test match today against Milano, and Marr was there, and he started. And no Mirza Lagumja. He's staying at Arcus Izmir for now, I believe. So, yeah, maybe he comes over halfway through the year. But yeah, it turns out that was just a gigantic smokescreen, and none of that was true. But now let's talk about this actual Monza team. Well, Everett, what do you have to add about this? Anything?
Well, that first and foremost, Rob, when we were chatting about it, I was like, yes, Mar, go get that back.
Go get the money.
Because if this is the scenario that's happening with everything, then St. Petersburg would be having to like offer Mar, like the only way it can happen is like they have to be able to offer him X amount of like percentage higher than what his current contract is,
and then they would pay the buyout
and pay the buyout. Exactly. So if they were doing it, there was like it was going to be a big money, but they didn't. But one of the things I said to you, Rob, was like, I feel bad for Monza because I really want to see what this team is capable of, and I really want to see what this team can do together. Mar, Ran, and Lepke, I think that's going to be a lot of fun. And then you've got the
trio.
That's a sick trio. And I mean, yesterday a buddy of mine, Seymour, messaged me, and he's like, Lepke and Mar both passed lights out at Olympic qualifiers, and so did Lepke and so did Ran. Like, this is going to be a very good passing team with a very good setter. And two potentially lethal, like dominating right sides. I think this is a team to really make a mark and really do something, ruffle some feathers.
The question is, though, and we've seen this, the team that I always think of with having too many weapons and not enough court spots for them is Verona. Verona, the last couple of years, have really struggled with a problem sort of like this, with now Monza has 3 legitimately SuperLega quality outside hitters and 2 legitimately SuperLega quality opposites. How are they going to feed all those mouths? How are they going to get all those guys on the court without breaking up their team's continuity? Like, I have no idea how they're going to handle that. Tommy, what would you predict if you had to predict right now? Who is Monza going to roll out this weekend when they play? Let's see, Lube. What would you project the starting lineup to be?
I would agree basically with or not. I don't know if maybe Lepke could start over Ran. And I don't know if I would have started Lawani as an opposite, because I was really impressed by what he did last year with Taranto. I mean, if you look at the stats, he was actually in the games, in the not few games he played, he actually had the highest points per set average of all the league.
Yeah, that's right.
So I mean, he proved he is a pretty good opposite. And I don't know what's the present situation with Schwark, because he missed a lot of games in the last seasons. He had a series of injuries that really limited his playing time and his career. But recently I heard at the team presentation that I mentioned before, both the coach and the management are really high on him. I think he will be the starter because the coach seems oriented to start him. About what you said, I think it's a lot better to have abundance problem than scarcity problems.
True.
So having more guys than being forced to play with the few guys you have, I mean, it's a no-brainer. What's the best choice? But yeah, most of it, I agree that this is a potentially very interesting team, a very entertaining team. We will be how Cacioppa does in what is basically his first year in SuperLega, because last year he didn't have time to play a single game because he had this terrible knee injury, and Zimmerman played throughout the season. So I mean, he is the guy who's supposed to be the starting setter of the Brazilian national team after Bruno retires, which will happen very soon. And
I'm not convinced, but that's another conversation. But
okay. But even when Bruno was still starting, I mean, Cacioppa sometimes took his place, and I mean, this guy is no pushover. This guy is a really good setter.
Cacciopa's very good. We were talking to Stephen Marr both this summer and last summer, like when Marr was about to go to Monza before Cacciopa got hurt. Like the excitement around Cacciopa coming in there was insane. He was one of the most, like, the way that other players and the way that people in the know in volleyball talked about Cacciopa was in a realm and in an echelon that I didn't really expect. Like everyone was really, really high on him, and I can't wait to see him play an entire season. But I agree. I know I agree with Everett, and I agree with Monza's management that I think Arthur Schwartz is the guy. I think that Arthur Schwartz is the guy. Everett, we've gotten to know Arthur Schwartz. We've talked about him a lot on this show, obviously, because Everett's Canadian, and we did Norsica, and we interviewed him and all that. But Everett, give the people like a 2-year history of what Arthur Schwartz has been doing and why you and I both think that this could be his best club career, his best club year ever.
Well, I mean, he started in the middle and in the SuperLega, and he started playing on the right side when he was with Cisterna a few years ago. And it was just one of those things where they needed a guy, and he kind of stepped in, and for a couple of seasons, he'd kind of play that in-between role. Last year was the first year that he was really fully an opposite when he made the move to Monza alongside Mar, and he talked about it was about how he was getting, like things so much from Grosjean, and we saw what he did over the course of this summer. I think Schwartz should start because he knows this league a lot, right? Like he had a 5 or 6 game spell last year when Grosjean was injured, where he was dropping 20 consistently. Like he was averaging 20 points without a doubt. We just saw him do it on the international stage with Team Canada at the Olympic qualifying tournament, right? So he has that experience. He's played at this level. Lawani has had like less than half a season of experience coming in, and he didn't play internationally this summer. So there's a lot, for me, there's a lot of question marks. Like let's remember that this is a league that Mads Ked Jensen came in and torched in his first year. And now he's like so far down the bench. Like it's so we've seen this time and time again where like these younger guys, especially guys who are like bigger, taller, a little bit more physical, can give you a look that not other guys can. They generally do well. And then once you look into year 2, that's when, people start having some tape on them, the sophomore slump, all that stuff. So I think it's a really interesting opportunity for Monza to have, where you have 2 guys who they're a little bit different in age. Like I think Schwartz is quite a bit older than Lawani, but they're 2 guys who are eager to prove themselves, and they're both really physical and touch high. I think Lawani's maybe a little bit more skilled than Arthur, but Arthur is just a straight up beast.
Yeah, Arthur is much bigger at 207, Lawani 1.98 m, and Schwartz is 28, where Lawani is 22. So definitely different players. But I really wanted to ram home that point about the sophomore slump, like you mentioned. Especially in the SuperLega, we see guys come in halfway through and like play half a season and light the world on fire, like Lawani did last year for Toronto. Like Tommy said, he had the highest points per set of any player in the league in his like maybe 6 or 7 matches that he played. He was tremendous. But exactly like Everett said, so often we see that a guy comes in, especially midway through a year, that the rest of the league is completely not prepared for. They don't have film, they don't have scouting data, they don't have time to devote to learning how to stop this guy. But then when a guy like a Lawani will go to play his first full season, you see a significant drop in statistical output because everybody has the film, they have the preparation, and these teams, especially in the SuperLega, take their scouting very, very seriously and are able to game plan against players once there's enough data on them. So I'm not saying that Lawani will go through that same sophomore slump, but we've seen it so many times before that it makes more sense to me to play the guy who, in Schwartz, that has played in the SuperLega for much, much longer, even though there's only been a couple years of him playing at opposite.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about just who starts, right? Because like once you get into the thick of the season, it's just Imano. So I really think that there's going to be some really interesting practices at Monza this year, especially when you look at this roster all the way through. I think it's just going to create for a good product, and I think this is going to be a team that really wants to challenge at that next level.
And I mean, I think it would be awesome to see 3 Canadian starters. It would be a sweet duo to see Mar and Lepke as the outsides. But Volleyball World social media would just crumble at the idea of Ron Takahashi sitting on the bench. So I'm not sure that's what we're going to see. I have a feeling that it will be Mar and Takahashi that start.
Yeah, I think so too. We'll really have to see. I mean, people in the chat have been saying it. Lepke was one of the best scorers in the Lega Volley last year, and it's actually why, even though Toronto was almost a relegation team, they were actually one of the top point per set getters. Like, they were earning a lot of their points. They were just giving a lot away as well too. And Lepke was a huge part of that at over 20 points a game before he got sick. So, I mean, you've got three fantastic left sides on this team, two solid opposites. I think it's gonna be solid. And like Cachopa, this is when you uncork him. This is when you let him go. Like, it's now or never for him, because he's an older guy. I think he's like 27. So he really needs to start getting out there.
Yeah, 27. This is going to be a big year for him. I'm excited to have him set the whole season. Tommy, do you agree this is definitely a playoff team?
Oh yeah, of course, no question about it. Just one thing, you mentioned Matt Jensen, and Jensen the next year will play in A2, so he's not even in SuperLega anymore.
Ouch.
In Cuneo. And what I'm a bit puzzled about this team is that yes, I agree with you. These are three very good level outside hitters, but there is no fourth outside hitter. There is no fourth outside hitter on this roster.
None.
And that's a really interesting choice.
Yeah, they only have 13 guys on the roster. They don't even which is why the Mirza Lagumzia signing was going to make sense if it had happened, because they literally don't even have a fourth body. So I don't even know what they're going to do for practices.
Yeah, probably we will play with the guy from the youth team or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said. I really hope that Schwar can have a solid season in terms of health, because he's been literally mauled by injuries in the last few seasons. I think he deserves to have a full healthy season and to prove his worth. Just one quick thing, I wouldn't underestimate their middles as well, because they, among the teams who chose to go with the double Italian middle, I think that's one of the best choices. I mean, Galassi is a national team starter. Di Martino, I think, is one of the most underrated middles in the league.
I completely agree. Di Martino is very good, very underrated. And as far as I can see, I just scrolled through our list. This is the only team in the league going with double Italian starters in the middle.
Yeah, probably.
Which is kind of crazy. You would think that would happen a lot more with the foreigner situation being the way it is, although the fact you get 4 foreigners in Italy instead of 3 means it's going to happen a little bit less. But obviously, you're more likely to use those foreigners on wings or setters than middles or liberos. But it is kind of interesting that this team is going to roll with 2 Italian middles, and I agree, they're both very capable. Very capable.
Yeah, so not only Monza is definitely a playoff team, I wouldn't be that much surprised if they end up in the top 4. I mean, it's a bit of an overreach.
Wow.
Maybe it's maybe an overreach.
I agree with them. I agree with them.
If things go well for them, and maybe if one of the top teams has a bad season, I don't see it that much unlikely that they can do an upset.
Somebody just said bring in Garrett Mwangatutia as the 4th outside hitter, and honestly, that kind of makes sense.
That's not the worst thing in the world.
I mean, as a fourth outside hitter is very good.
I honestly think that kind of makes perfect sense. So we'll see. Maybe we can will that one into existence. I definitely agree Monza is a playoff team, but top 4. Ooh, that is a bit of a reach. They would have to stay flawlessly healthy and find the perfect combination of these guys, and maybe have one of the teams above them slip up. But I'm excited to watch this team. This team will be fun. This team will be good. And especially if you're Canadian, this should be your favorite team in the league.
Definitely.
Oh, I'm already planning a trip to Milano this year. Rob, you should come with.
I would love to. We got to get those guys to send us back some jerseys. I would love.
Yeah.
Or maybe Tommy can do that for us. All right,
Mrs. Mar, I know you're probably
Mrs.
listening.
Mar,
get us. Can we hook that up, please?
Mrs. Marr she probably is watching. We love the Marr family.
At some point, if she's not watching live right in this moment, she will be seeing this at some point, and she will be skipping forward to this point, especially.
to make sure that we don't say anything bad about her son.
I would never.
No, never.
I would never.
Neither would I. I would certainly never. I would never bring up a time when he got hit in the face by TJ DeFalco in VNL. I would never talk about something like that. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to a team that I alluded to earlier as being a team with a whole lot of weapons and not enough court space to use them. And unfortunately, one of the stoogiest coaches in all of volleyball. We're talking about Rana Verona, new sponsor this year for Verona. Under, again, somehow, Everett, we're still in the year 2023, we are still out here being forced to watch a Radostin Stoichev coach team. How is that still possible in the year 2023? What is this guy still doing on the sideline?
They love him in Verona. And I mean, hey, you can look at it and say that this team has maybe struggled in past years, but I mean, hey, well, what can I say? They seem to like him. I know, isn't he the guy that has multiple athletes have said like they will not play for him, like it's in their contract?
Bruno, Juantorena,
yeah.
Thomas Jeschke's been very vocal about hating him.
Tommy would know all of this because of all of the history was between Stoichev and Modena in years past. But I mean, yeah, he's still here. And I mean, hey, you're talking about like just having just so many riches. Man, when you look at like who they have on the bench on this team,
their bench is ridiculous.
In guys like Amin, that's absolutely ridiculous. But the big question is, can they pass the ball well enough to be at that next level? And can Nomuri Keita be a high-end opposite?
My question is, it's not even can they pass the ball well enough, it's who is going to be passing the ball. Because last year, when Verona signed Nomuri Keita, we all assumed that he was going to be the opposite because he's from Mali, of all places. He was in the Korean League, scoring a bunch of points. And then they brought him over, and sure enough, week one, he's starting on the left side, passing next to Rok Mozic because of some 7'4" behemoth named Maxim Sapozhkov, who no one ever heard before, who turned out to be one of the best opposites in the league. So Keita spent the whole year hitting on the left, passing like trash, but it completely didn't matter because he's so physical that he could score against three blockers, no problem. Now they go out and get Donovan Javaronok, who sat the bench on Trentino last year, but he started on Monza 2 years ago and was very good. They still have Rok Mozic, who's one of the great superstar young prospects in the game. And they go and get Amin Esmailnejad, the lefty from Iran, who was like the best player at VNL in 2022. And they have like 4 capable middles. And they go out and get Nikola Jovovic, who they have absolutely no space for in terms of court and foreigner limits. Like, so what on earth is this team going to look like?
My question is last year we assumed that Keita was going to be on the right side. His position in Volleybox is outside, right? So that there's like, according to Volleybox, this team only has one opposite, and that is Amin. One thing, though, is that you do have Francesco Sani on this team coming out of UCI. I believe I got to, yeah. He's spent some time with the in the American team system. As far as I'm concerned, Sani has always been an opposite.
He is an opposite.
So he's marked
idea why he's listed that way.
So if I'm looking at this, I'm almost wondering if Keita's on the left side and you have Amin starting on the right with Sani as the backup.
I have no idea. That's part of my issue with this Verona team, and it's the exact same as it was last year. Last year they had Gord Perrin and never played him to such a degree that he ended up leaving midway through the year to go back to Russia for a club in Siberia that supported him way better, that paid him better, and gave him court time. Like, I personally don't understand what Radostin Stoichev is doing. I never have, but of all the teams to allow him to have full control over, for a guy like Stoichev to have this many toys to play with is a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. And that's too bad because I like this Verona team and I really like their individual pieces. I see nothing but disaster for this Verona team, unfortunately. I'm hoping that they are able to figure it out and put a combination of wings together that makes sense, but I don't know what that is. And I certainly don't trust Stoichev to find that within the first 19 out of the 22 matches of the season. Tommy, what's your take on this Verona team?
Well, first of all, we talked. I would normally agree with you that this is a team with a very deep roster, but actually they will have a very hard time on match day one because Keita is definitely out for the first game. Mosic has knee problems. Javornok has muscle aches. So I don't think it's going to be an easy job to find out 3 outsides for the next game. But yeah, of course, these are not supposed to be long-lasting injuries. So it's going to be an issue just for the first couple of games. But aside from that, I can tell you, of course, people who are part of our Discord community know this, but I'm not really a fan of Stoichev, so I'm maybe a little biased here. So I'll try to be less biased as possible. What I can tell you about Stoichev is that he's a guy who relies a lot on scouting and statistics. And recently there was like a sort of a global scout report that showed that especially in men's volleyball, but also in women's volleyball, there's been less and less emphasis on passing and receiving, because statistically there seems to be less and less correlation between your passing stats and your percentage of victories. And I found personally the research, as a person who has some experience with statistics, really biased. There was a lot of endogeneity, and so I don't know how much reliable this statistic can be. But looking at how Verona was built, Stoichev probably built it based on this report, because yeah, Javornok is not that bad of a passer actually, but yeah, I don't see any really good passer in the team. The libero is another big question mark. He was Lube's backup libero last season. He never played as a starter in SuperLega, so I mean, I don't know how good this guy can be. But if you look at the roster has on paper has a lot of potential, really a lot of potential. We talked about their outsides are really good, but look at the rest of the team. I mean, Spirito last season had a wonderful season. He has been for many years one of the many since we talked before, he maybe was the Lanza of setters. I mean, he had the great potential at the beginning of his career and ended up being sort of a mid-tier player, but last year he was very good. And if you look at the middles, you have Grozdanov, who's been a solid middle in the last season. Mosca is a very interesting prospect. He's part of a national team. You have Cortesia, who had some games with the national team as well. He's a solid backup. Zinger, who plays in Italian. He had very good numbers last season. I mean, this team on paper has a lot of potential. As you said, I mean, this is not like a computer game when you can just stack up on potentially good players and win. In volleyball, we all know very much. We know so well that chemistry plays a very important role, not only as on the human side, but also on the technical side. Volleyball is a machine that needs constant flow. So every mechanism has to be oiled up, has to be smooth, and that's I think the main concern about Verona is also because in Italy we have a saying. I don't know if it's in other languages as well, but it's too many roosters on the pen. And I mean, we talked about Amin. Will Amin be glad to be Keita's backup if he starts, will Keita be happy to go back on the left or on the bench? I mean, Stoichev is not very much known for his human management skills, should I say.
Understatement of the year.
Yes,
Wow.
so there are pitfalls, there are potential troubles in here, but on paper they look very good. So I think it's either boom or bust. No middle ground here.
Definitely. I mean, Verona last year, they honestly should have won a playoff series. They went up 2-1 against Lube Civitanova in the quarterfinal, and at home they completely blew it in that fourth match and never had a chance in the fifth match. And yeah, somebody in the chat says too many cooks in the kitchen. That's the American saying that I had in my head to compete with that one, Tommy. Like Verona last year, that they were built similarly, like a couple different pieces, but the identity and the potential problems were the same. And they still finished fifth in the regular season, almost won a playoff series. So I agree. I think they could be very, very good on paper. I think that the chance of bust is greater than the chance of boom, in my opinion.
Yeah, give them 50-50.
Okay.
It's a very delicate equilibrium.
But even with the potential of bust, like even if it crashes and burns, they're still going to make the playoffs on talent alone.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, for sure. I think they're gonna have a similar season to last year, where they come out real hot and then kind of limp into the playoffs, because that kind of what seems to happen with Stoichev's teams. And I think that's it's really easy to be good at the beginning of the season when everything is going well and you're just going off of talent alone. And I think there's plenty of talent on this team, but we'll see how this team is going towards the end. They managed to keep it together like in that playoff series, but then obviously everything imploded. So yeah, we'll see how this team goes down in the long run.
We will see. So anything else on Verona? Because I'm very excited to talk about this next team.
Of course you are.
And that's because of who our guest is. Our next team is, of course, Valsa Group Modena. They finished 12-10 last year, third. Good enough for third in the preliminary round, but they did lose in the quarterfinal to Piacenza. Tommy is a huge Modena fan. We got to put that out there right away. Modena, one of the quote unquote big four teams in the Superlega. It's Modena, Perugia, Trentino, and Lube Civitanova. It's one of those four wins the Superlega or wins the Scudetto pretty much every year. Maybe like literally every year. Tommy, in like recent history, has there ever been a year where one of those four teams didn't win?
When was the last time? I can't remember when the last time was, but we are going, I think, in the 0 years. Just let me do a real quick check.
At least like 20 years ago.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I'm looking back. It looks like Cuneo won out of nowhere in 2009.
Yeah, Cuneo, yes, and that was last time, because then there was like either Trento or Modena or Lube, once Perugia, and I think those are the teams that divided the Scudettos in the recent years.
Yep. So Modena, as we've talked about before, Modena was hurt by the pandemic more than a lot of teams. Modena, as Tommy well knows, is a team who relies a lot financially on ticket sales. They're not going to be a group that is fulfilled entirely by sponsors. They need to put butts in seats at their games in order to sustain themselves financially. And for that reason, they got hurt a lot by COVID. Their budget decreased a little bit the last couple of years. There have been a lot of questions in the front office, Tommy. I don't exactly remember. Have they changed ownership or chairman? Like,
yes.
Has that position changed?
Yes, it changed at the beginning of last season.
Okay.
When the minority owners, Giulia Gabbana, took the majority of Modena shares. Now she held like 10%. Now she holds 90%. The rest of the remaining 10% is owned by a local firm. And that's how Modena was pretty much all the time. They don't have cash cows like Lube or Perugia. They don't rely on public funding like Trentino does, and they can do it because of a very peculiar political situation that I will not be here to explain. And yes, this is sort of a year zero for Modena, because we talked about this ownership change. When it happened last year, the team was pretty much already defined, so the new ownership couldn't do much. But this season, the new ownership wanted to leave their mark, and they did some very neat changes, some very controversial ones, like the Gianni firing. But this is a team that is made by the new ownership as this is the new beginning for Modena. This has been the message they they sent over and over again, even because in the last few seasons there's been some internal controversies that, among with, of course, the pandemic, generated some unhappiness, should I say, between the fans. So the attendance in Modena, which has always been the highest and still is the highest in the league, decreased quite significantly, also because Modena had, for the reason we talked about, the highest prices in the league. And last year's season ticketing campaign was quite, I won't say a disaster, but it was it went bad because the prices were high, and on paper the team wasn't that good. But yes, as we saw, the team was pretty surprising. After a sloppy start, they reached third place in regular season. They have been second for quite a long time. That they crumbled a bit after they won the challenge cup because of pre-existing injuries, tiredness, a very short roster. So they kind of flunked the playoff, where they were up to 2-0 against Piacenza, and they were reverse swept both in the series and in game 5. But
that was really bad.
Yeah, but Modena was really on their knees. The Ngapet was playing with a serious injury, and Bruno was really tired. The roster was really not that deep last year, so that was a big factor. And as I mentioned, this is a new start with some pretty interesting prospects, but also some very big question marks. And I know I'm already launched, so I will go. Go in depth. As I mentioned before, there was the firing of Andrea Gianni kind of caught pretty much everyone by surprise, because Modena was an overachiever last season. Many people thought that it was also because of Gianni's hand, but then at the very last day of his window of option, the new ownership decided to terminate his contract abruptly and to sign this guy, Francesco Petrella, which is a Modena native. He has been coaching the Modena youth for quite a while. Then he went to Trento to be the Angelo Renzetti's second, and now he's going to be at his very, very first experience as a head coach in SuperLega. And it's not going to be with all due respect, in a team like Catania, but in a team like Modena, which is, probably the place when you experience the most pressure, because fans have been going to the games for like 30 or 40 years. Modena has been around since the 60s, and they are very, very long, very hardcore fans, but also very expert fans. So they know they are very keen to support the team, but they're also very easy to criticize the team when things start going bad. So you get a lot of pressure, and to be there as your first experience as a head coach, I think this guy is 33 or something, is really
wow
young.
He's younger than half the team.
Yeah,
that's crazy, because I was going to say that maybe that's a good thing for him to have the veterans of Bruno, Osmani Juan Terena, who we certainly should talk about, and then Daddy. Obviously, you have those three legendary veterans, but I didn't know that those three were older than him. That's crazy.
He is for sure. I'm 38, and he is for sure younger than me, because I went to school with his sister. So he, wow. And his sister is older, so he is by He's for sure younger than me. So he's
wow, yeah, he's born in 1989. He's 34.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
Yeah, and so if you want,
still be playing.
Sure.
if you that's going to be a big question mark. As you mentioned, there are some very interesting, should I say, veterans on this team. Bruno, of course, Stankovic, and the return of Osmani Juantorena, who I think, in my opinion, is probably the best player of the 21st century. Probably, arguably.
Wow. That's
I mean,
we could make a whole video about that, but that's a very interesting claim.
Yeah, if you remember him in his prime, when he was playing with Trento, I mean, he was really a beast. I mean, now he's 38. Of course, he doesn't have the athleticism he used to have, and he had a long series of injuries, even in his last season at Lube. But he's still Osmani Juantorena, and for a guy like Rinaldi to have the opportunity to train every day with a guy that I don't know if he actually is the best player of the 21st century, but he's surely one of the best of his generation. It's a huge plus, and Stankovic and Bruno are going to be some very nice examples and leaders for the young guys, because even at the setter position, Modena has a really interesting prospect, Mattia Bonifante, which we will have a very limited playing time, of course, because I mean, it's still Bruno, even if he's 37. But yes, they will have strong leadership and very, very solid examples to look at. But except for that, if you look at the starting seven is actually very young, except for Bruno. They have interesting prospects. I personally have a very very soft spot for Vladimir Daviskiba. I think he's a very underrated player. I think last year in Monza he was amazing. He's a complete player. He's a really good server. He's a solid passer. He's a solid attacker. He can pretty much do it all. I think the biggest question mark, apart from Petrella, will be Sapochkov and Federici.
For sure.
Sapochkov, as you mentioned before, surprised everyone last year. He's a huge guy. He scored 37 in one game. He was except for Lawani, he was the best player in the league for points per set average. The question is, will he repeat? I mean, we all know that the second year is the toughest. People now know him. And also, I'm not 100% sure about his connection with Bruno. Bruno is a guy who likes to set very fast and tense sets. He likes high and slow balls. I mean, that's a question, but I mean, he's Bruno. He's not going to have problems adapting to him, I think. The other big question mark, I think, is Federici. Federici went in 2 years from being the national team's backup libero to be a total bust. I mean, his numbers have been very, very, very bad in the last couple of seasons. But he's very young, so he has time, his margin to improve and to go back to his form, and maybe move into a new environment can help. But number-wise, Federici has been one of the worst liberos in the last season, so it's going to be a very interesting bet for Modena. And I mean, I think I said well enough. If you have any more questions, if you want to add more points, I will leave the stage to you.
Thank you. That was thank you for all that detail from a Modena fan who likes to give us in the Discord literally straight from the mouth of the former chairman, like very interesting behind the scenes detail what's going on in that club. I have a couple takes to back up kind of what you said. I totally agree on Daviskiba. I think he's very underrated and very complete. I agree that Rinaldi being able to be supported by Osmani Juantorena is fantastic. I also think that Giovanni Sanguinetti being able to be supported by Daddy Stankovic, similarly fantastic. And if Daddy needs to play, Daddy is Italian now. So that they can put him in for either of the middles, and that's fine. Also, a gigantic upgrade as far as German middles go, upgrading from Crick to Brema. That's fantastic. I love Brema. I can't wait to see Bruno chucking balls to him. I think that's going to be really fun. And then my take about Sapochkov potentially in the sophomore slump. The question is 2 meters and 20 even able to succumb to the sophomore slump? Does the sophomore slump even apply when you're just that big? I guess we'll find out. Everett, what do you think about this Modena team?
What I really want to see is Bruno is historically one of the best right side setters in the game, and I want to see how he utilizes that with Sapochkov. Sapochkov did it with lesser help in like Spirito and Rafael last year for Verona. So I'm really interested to see how Bruno is able to chuck things up for Sapochkov. I think it's going to make things a little bit easier because it's just going to be a straight high ball to the right side, and then you can run it fast elsewhere. In the middle, especially, I think Rob, you really like Sanguinetti, and Brema. I mean, the dude has been outstanding since he came back from injury. So Rinaldi is also
Berlin's best player last year.
Yeah. So Ronaldo's also grown on quite a bit. It's just interesting that all of their big moves in the offseason mainly, like other than Sapochkov, was to go get like bench players, like Juantarena. Like Juantarena said he was never going to play for another SuperLega club other than Lube when he left them, and now he's back to play on Modena's bench. I really don't understand that. So that's a little interesting to me. I don't really have super high hopes for this team, to be perfectly honest. I don't know if they're going to be able to slot themselves into the top four. Like if I look at this team compared to a Monza, I like Monza. Same thing with like a Milano too, maybe a Piacenza.
Hey, Everett, where are you from again?
Where am I from?
I'm calling you out for Canadian bias, picking Monza over Modena. I'm just messing with you, but I mean. Yeah. I do agree with you a little bit. I think that reception could be a problem for this team. Now, I think that getting rid of Rossini was years overdue. I thought he was a complete waste of space at libero the last couple of years.
He's a ping pong paddle.
It was actually the best libero of last SuperLega season. If you look at the receiving efficiency, I was surprised as well. But last year it was the best libero for receiving efficiency.
I'm very surprised, but Federici and Rinaldi receiving together worries me a little bit. Mm-hmm. And which of these players is going to become the guy in the mind of Bruno? That I think is an important question too, because probably, but is that like it? You don't have to convince me. You have to convince Bruno that Sapochkov is the guy. And Bruno's standards for the guy are extremely high. And I'm curious to see how that goes. And that coaching relationship with Petrella and Bruno and Daddy Stankovic and Juantarena and just the whole dynamic around the team. We're going to keep bothering Tommy for Modena insight throughout the season because this is one of the most interesting teams in the league, I think. I think if they finish top 4, that would be a good season.
Yeah,
I think that'd be a great season.
Yeah. I think roster-wise, if you do the FIFA game I mentioned before, Modena is probably the sixth best team in SuperLega, something like that. But I think they have a very young core, and they might be. It all depends on how, for example, Rinaldi and Sanguinetti will improve over the year. Because if you remember last season, Rinaldi had a horrible start. People were already, starting to do some weird calculation to see how can we bench him since in Italian, can we play with with both Italian middles and Rossini to bench him. And then he had a huge growth over the season, especially on offense. His passing is still bad, but not as bad as the beginning. He was a total liability in reception. Now, he's improved. Of course, he's no libero, but he improved a lot. And if they keep improving, if Vladis Kiba confirms he is being sound, if Federici stops sucking, I mean, there's a lot of ifs. But if
that's what I was just about to say. That I know you're a Modena fan, Tommy, but there are a lot of ifs. There are a lot of ifs.
I'm the first one to say it. I mean,
yeah.
I think sixth place should be a reasonable goal for this season. Anything that comes after should be welcome plus. I just think they have the potential to do better. It's the same thing we were saying with other teams. They have the potential to do even much better, but I will settle for like a fifth, sixth place, because there are at least 5 teams that are better equipped than Modena. And there are teams that have pretty much the same level. And but again, volleyball is not math, so we'll see.
Well said. Well said. I think that's a very good summary. All right, can we move on from Modena?
No, because we failed to mention the GOAT Pinali is back on the team.
Oh, gross!
Get out of here! Get out of here! You guys are talking about my Canadian bias, and yet Tommy's Modena bias is so apparent here.
Everett, your Canadian bias is far more extreme than Tommy's Modena bias.
I don't like Pinali. It was just a shout out to the Discord community who likes Pinali a lot.
We all Pinali is the Lanza of people named Pinali. Like Giulio Pinali is so bad. Fortunately, unless God forbid something happens to Shaposhkov, we're never going to have to see him other than sitting in a warm-up jacket on the bench where he belongs. So
maybe he's a pinch server sometimes. I mean, the only thing he can do well is serving. So maybe that's sometimes. True.
Yeah, he can serve. And I know nothing about his little brother, who's like the 4th outside, so I don't need to worry about him.
He's going to be a 4th outside. He has a very good quality, but here's not the place to discuss it.
Fair enough. Okay, let's move on. It's time to talk about Perugia. So I don't want to spend too much time going over again the absolute collapse that was Perugia from last year, because Everett and I already talked about it. We talked about it so much. But who hasn't? But we haven't heard it from Tommy. We haven't talked to Tommy, at least on the show, since Perugia, just to put it on the record, went 22-0, undefeated, and then lost to the 8th seed Milano in the first round of the playoffs in one of the great chokes in all of sports history. So, Tommy, from your perspective and from the perspective inside Italian borders, what were the consequences of that collapse?
Well, that was one of the biggest upsets, I think, not only in volleyball, but I think in all Italian sports history, because not only they finished 22-0, but they stacked up 65 points out of 66 available. They lost just 1 point along the road. I mean, it kind of reflected the preseason expectation. We all thought that they had a roster that was so much better than the others. So when they finished with this record, we weren't that surprised, actually. We said, okay, yes, their roster is way better than the others. It's going to be just a red carpet until the Scudetto. Then something happened, and it still puzzles me. I mean, I think that we talked a lot about the fact that volleyball is math, that chemistry is important, that in a sport when you have 6+1 players, who are pretty much always the same one. It's not like basketball when you have 5 players, but substitution are ordinary. You can have multiple substitution. Even if you start from the bench, you can have lots of playing time. Here, if you're not a starter, it's way more unlikely that you become a significant part of the game. And so it's very easy that if something in this relatively small mechanism goes off, the rest of the team falls down with him as well. And if that part of the mechanism is the setter, that increases the chances a lot. And I think that was one of the key points. I mean, Giannelli had terrific seasons with the national team in the last couple of years. If you if you look at only the games played with the national teams and you disregard all club season championship, I think case would be made for Giannelli to be the best setter in the world. But if you plug club season, you factor in club season as well, the case goes dramatically wrong, because for some reason Giannelli can't seem to maintain the extremely high level he keeps in the national team when he plays in the clubs. I don't know if it's a matter of connection with his spikers or the other players. I don't know if it's a matter of pressure, of different motivation. I don't know what it is, but I think one key factor is Simone Giannelli. Giannelli is just not the same guy that he is when he plays with the national team jersey. Then
maybe he's just tired.
I don't know. He didn't seem tired this summer, but yeah, if he was tired, they have Ropret on the bench. He's not Giannelli, but he's a very capable substitute. So in the games with lower tier teams, they could have made him rest. But I think it's a problem of tiredness regarding Giannelli. Maybe for other players, because we saw that. This is a very stacked team, but the top dog is pretty clear who it is, and their top dog, Wilfredo Leon, suffered from physical problems last year. He put up his usually insane numbers. He was, I think, the only outside hitter in general, outside an opposite hitter, was able to finish with more than 50% kills last season, and the second one was like 47. He finished with 54%, something like that. He had ridiculous numbers as always, but in the last part of the season, maybe his injuries caught up with him. He wasn't just the same Leon we used to admire, and even though they had this incredibly deep roster, they kind of failed. They look scared to me. I think the problem was mental, not much physical. I think the pressure, they eventually crumbled under this pressure also because, if you look at the history, Perugia has been probably the richest team in SuperLega in the last 6-7 seasons or something, and they managed to win the Scudetto only once. And even in that once, it was maybe more because of Lube doing one of the huge choke in the final series and all the finals they played against Perugia, rather than Perugia's merit, even if their team had huge merit. It was Aaron Russell played out of his mind. Ivan Zaitsev played on the left, and he sacrificed himself for the team. Atanasievich had a huge season. It was a great team, but I thought that season Lube was even better, but they choked completely. The rest of the times it was Perugia who choked more than once, and I think they're starting to suffer with the pressure of being the richest guy, being always the top roster on paper, but in the end always failing, always finding something that doesn't work. I think Lorenzetti is something like the 7th coach in the last 6 seasons, something like that.
That's what I really wanted to bring up, is because this Perugia team, now I think it's not even debatable that their failure last year was mental. It's not even a question that failure was mental. There's no other explanation for it. And there are a lot of comparisons, and we've made them before, of Perugia being like the Dallas Cowboys of American football. They're extremely similar in a lot of ways. They have a very similar owner. Jerry Jones, who owns the Dallas Cowboys, and Gino Circi, who owns Perugia, are both they're loaded, obviously. They're very vocal. They're very involved in the day-to-day operations of the club. And still, their clubs, despite having the most resources, having the most eyeballs, completely failed to produce at the highest levels. They continue to blow it in the playoffs. The Dallas Cowboys haven't made a conference championship game in 30 years. Perugia has won one out of one Scudetto since they've been the highest budget team and have had probably the best roster in volleyball for the last 3 years and have blown it. So, and with that revolving door of coaches is a problem. My question to you both is: Angelo Lorenzetti the answer? He won a Scudetto with Trentino last year. They were able to pull him away from that great situation, and now he will be the guy taking the heat if Perugia fails. Is Angelo Lorenzetti the answer?
Only if Cerci lets him do what he wants to do, right? There's all these reports about Cerci being in the dressing room throughout the playoffs, before the Zaxa matches, all of these things. I mean, I do understand it. Like, this is a guy who's built this team up from absolutely nothing, from like the depths of Italian volleyball since the beginning of the 2000s, and has built this team up. So like, this isn't just a millionaire throwing money at it. Like, this is this guy's passion project, you know, like he's this businessman and he's putting everything into it. So I absolutely have the most amount of respect, but you do have to kind of loosen the grip a little bit. Like, Lorenzetti is exactly what this team needs if Cerci lets him do his job. And that means he needs to stay out of the dressing room. He needs to stay out of the practice facility. He needs to stay out of trying to coach this team and let the coach that he's brought in to do the job, right? It's do or die for this team this season. That's what it really is. Like, you can't make the changes that you made. You can't bring in the guys that you've brought in. On paper, this is the best team in the world. Now, I have my reservations on bringing in a guy like Wasim Bentara. I don't think it moves the needle for them whatsoever. I think he's a guy that hasn't played at the highest level ever, really. He made the playoffs for the first time last year in Plus Liga. Like, he's Tunisian, so he doesn't ever play internationally or at a high level. So he's just a little bit unproven. So I'm very interested to see how he reacts. But the reality is, it doesn't matter. This team should be able to take care of business. This team should be able to take care of business with an opposite who's scoring like 12, 13 points a game. That's the reality of it. If they can just play their game and not overcomplicate it, things will be fine. But there's a lot of pressure in Perugia, and maybe the fact that they're only playing in the regular season this year helps them. They just have one focus, one goal, right? Win one championship before you start going for the Infinity Gauntlet. Because that's basically what it was. Like, they went. Like, they were undefeated, and then they went 6-6 to finish the year. So,
yep, they lost that Italian Cup semifinal, I think, to Piacenza.
Yeah,
that was their first loss of the year, and then it all crumbled after that. Yeah, I mean, we don't even need to talk about the players that much, because it's the same. They have 3 world-class outside hitters, like the 3 maybe top 10 outside hitters in the world. They have 3 world-class middles. They have 2 outstanding opposites, and I am very high on Bentara. Everett and I have talked about this. I think Bentara is a substantial upgrade over Kamil Ryklicki. Substantial. I guess we will see. They still have Ginelli, who I agree with Tommy in his club career last couple of years has not been good at all, and he should be taking a lot of the blame for some of Perugia's failure. At the end of the day, it's mental with this team. I completely agree with Everett. If Angelo Lorenzetti is allowed to do his job, he is the right type of coach that this Perugia team needs. Mm-hmm. But that is an if. That is an if you can keep Gino Cerci out of the locker room. That is a huge if. So I don't know how that's going to go. They are going to play the Club World Championship again, which they won last year. They'll probably win it again. Who cares? That tournament's meaningless. But
they get to play it again?
Yeah, they do, because Zaxa and JSW both said no.
Yeah.
And the FIVB is not even being like, okay, like, let's go to the next. Like, they're like, no, Perugia, straight up.
Because Perugia technically tied for 3rd in Champions League, tied for 3rd in Europe. So that's why they got one of the spots. But I mean, they're probably going to win, and nobody cares. That tournament is meaningless. When it comes to Coppa Italia, which they could and should win, but Scudetto is what they should have their eyes on. That should be their one and only focus this year. And if they don't get it done, they might have to like blow up this roster and start from scratch.
Yeah. You said about Cerci. I remember it was I think 2017 when Perugia reached their so far first Champions League final after a thrilling match against heavy favorite Lube. And you probably don't know because you don't get Italian channels, but right after the game, Lorenzo Bernardi, who at the time was the Perugia's coach, was being interviewed. At a certain point, Cerci came in, and Bernardi stopped the interview to go to Cerci and said, Did you see that? Did you see that, Mr. Chairman? I don't flag big games. I don't flag big games. So it was a very heated argument from Bernardi's side, and that implied that Sirchi was had at least tried to interfere with his work before the game. So this is, of course, a factor. And about if Lorenzetti is the guy, I have two arguments: one against and one in favor of that. The one against is as much as I love Lorenzetti as a human being, I mean, how can you not? He's a very lovable human being. As a coach, is widely regarded as a great coach. But if you look at his recent history, since he won the Scudetto with Modena in 2016, I mean, he didn't really win anything relevant with Trento until last year. But I mean, after Perugia's suicide, Perugia was arguably the best team left in the Scudetto race. So I mean, kudos to him for winning the Scudetto. But after the Perugia suicide, it wasn't that much of a.
I agree. Trento was they were the best team remaining.
And if you look at his history, every time he had a good team on paper, he underperformed. But every time he had a bad team on paper, he overperformed. So this team, of course, looks really good on paper. So that's one case against. But one case for is we mentioned Gianelli as being one of the reasons Perugia has underperformed. Lorenzetti is the guy who made Gianelli who he is. Yep. So, I mean, he is the perfect coach for him to thrive. So if that works, I think Perugia will not have many obstacles for his Scudetto race. Also, in the recent years, it worked really well as a jinx. So I'm good doing it again.
Great work. We can expect another year of Perugia blowing it, and we can thank TommyBlizzard for that. All right, I think that's quite enough about Perugia. We've covered them a lot the last 12 months, and I'm curious to see what they do. Can we move on?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the team that Perugia lost to in that all-time great upset in the quarterfinal. Allianz PowerVolley Milano, who finished 8th last year and then came out of the clouds to beat Perugia in 5 matches in that quarterfinal. They ended up losing the third place series to Piacenza and not really being all that competitive. They clearly spent all they had to beat Perugia, and that's okay. Nobody's going to fault them for that. They made 2 notable moves this offseason, in my opinion. One was replacing Jean Patry with Petar Dzirlic, who we talked about earlier was unbelievable for Cisterna last year. The other was pulling Matej Koziski away from Trentino, where he had played a little bit of both wings, but if you ask me, he will most definitely play outside hitter for Milano, likely across from Yuki Ishikawa. And they have Osniel Margarejo off the bench, who was awesome last year. And they have Ferry Regers off the bench at opposite, who took the world by storm at Olympic qualifiers this year for Belgium. Still have Poro Setting, who we've talked about a lot on this channel. They still have Losair in the middle, who we've also talked a lot about on this channel. They still have Piano and Vitelli in the middle. They have a new libero, who cares? And they still have Piazza coaching, who we've also talked a lot about on this channel. So, yeah, we do love Piazza on this channel. So we don't have to spend that much time on Milano, I don't think, because like the synthesis of their parts seems to be pretty clear. Just what kind of a season do you two guys think Milano is going to have? Tommy, start us off.
Well, it's a very interesting team, actually, because I think having Dirlic over Patry is an improvement, but not because Patry sucks, but because he clearly had lots of trouble connecting with Porro. He had a very bad season, but he's no pushover, of course, but the way Dirlic played recently, maybe he can be more helpful to Milano. Then there's Kajiski, who is going to be 40 next year. And but I mean, he won the Scudetto last year as an MVP. He's being played out of his mind.
Amazing.
I mean, both as an opposite and as an outside, as you mentioned. I mean, year after year, we say, okay, this is the year when he starts crumbling down to his age, but it's never that. So, I mean, why should he this year? I mean, so
turns out that not playing during the summer, taking it off from the national team and giving yourself an off season, turns out it can prolong your club career. Who knew? Who would have thought?
Yeah, I mean this team looks good on paper. They have also a nice bench. Vitelli is another one of those middles that is deeply underrated. His numbers last year were really good. So they have a good team. They have a deep team. And you said who cares about the libero, but Damiano Catania was actually named best libero at the latest. What I think it was the Under 20 World Championship when they won with the team with Rinaldi, Micheletto, Stefani, etc. He was the best libero of the. I mean, he has a good prospect. He's a really good prospect. Last year he wasn't spectacular, but he's a good prospect. So this is another team that has the potential to do well. They will do without Porro for the first couple of games. He is still aching, and his backup is a nice prospect as well, a guy named Zonta, but last year he played in A3, so don't expect that much from him the last couple of games. This team has the potential to do better. He's one of the teams that could potentially upset the four better equipped teams. I mean, pitfalls are there for them as well. Will Dirlich adapt to Porro's setting? Will Kaziski confirm his Benjamin Button status? Will Piano have another relatively season-free injury because he's very injury-prone? I mean, there are lots of pitfalls, but I'm quite high on Milano. Also, this year they will play in they made the new arrangements for the arena. They plan to do more to fill it up more after last year was a bit so and so they have the potential to be a contender of the top four places.
How about you, Everett? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the depth on this team is really what does it for me. Like, I think the distance between guys like Dirlich and Riegers and then Melgarejo, and I'm guessing Kaczynski is going to be really small. Same thing with the Vitelli in the middles. I think you might have low key one of the best middle cores on this team. And if Catania is as good of a prospect as you say he is, Tommy, then this team is going to pass really well too. Right. So I think we saw this team really just like grind out some big wins last year, most specifically in the playoffs. And I think that gives this team a lot of belief. So I'm not entirely sure if we're going to see Kaczynski as much as we have. But I'm definitely excited to see Riegers. I think that Melgarejo always just gets like the short end of the stick. So
Melgarejo is awesome. And it would be crazy to play Kaczynski every game when you don't have to at age 39.
Yeah, 100%. So basically, like I think losing guys like Abadapor and Patry is a big hole. Like, who's going to play middle for this team when they're down all their middle without Abadapor? But it's really, to me, it's going to be like between Dirlich, like can Porro give Dirlich the ball? And while I do expect to get Dirlich to get the bulk of the balls, I do expect Riegers to get in there as well. I think he showed that he can be a top level scorer at the Olympic qualifying tournament with Belgium. So I think there's a bunch of Belgium guys who are really looking to kind of push themselves. So yeah, I think this team is really a team that, like, this is a team, when I look at a team like Modena, like it's the same deal. Like, I would pick Milano before I pick Modena.
On paper, yes.
Yeah, you were really lining up that Abadapor in the middle joke, weren't you, Everett? You were really ready for that one.
No, I mean, no, not really. It just kind of came.
Somebody just pointed out in the chat. Oh, I mean, we might have to ban this person for talking poorly about Yuki Ishikawa. We can't have that. You are not allowed to criticize Yuki Ishikawa on this channel. You are not allowed to watch volleyball ever again for hypothesizing that he might be poor at float serve reception. You cannot say things like that on this channel. God forbid. Yes, Yuki Ishikawa is not good at float serve reception. We will keep our eye on that particular area. Anything else about Milano, or can we move on to our Champions League teams?
Yep, we can.
Yep.
So, Gas Sales Blue Energy Piacenza will be representing Italy in the CEV Champions League this year by virtue of winning the third place series last year over Milano. They finished 6th in the regular season, but had a good playoff. We talked about them beating Modena. They beat who did they lose to in the in the semifinal. Was it Lube or Trentino? I don't remember.
I think it was Trento. Let me check.
That sounds right, because I think Lube beat Milano. So regardless, Piacenza will represent Italy in Champions League this year. They have basically the exact same team as last year. Seriously, their starting seven, in my opinion, is going to be identical.
Yeah.
And the only main change is they allow Andrea Anastasi to fail out of Perugia, and then they give him the reins to this team, as if that is a good idea, considering what he has done to the last two clubs that he's coached, running Warszawa into the ground and engineering the greatest choke in volleyball history with Perugia. Sure, that sounds like a great guy to hire. So with that, however, on paper, Piacenza is still awesome. I mean, Lucarelli and Leal, when healthy, are awesome. Robert Lanu Simone, when healthy, which is a huge if, is the best middle in the world. Blizzard can be a great setter. We talk about Yuri Romano a lot on this channel, and I think that he is definitely a hinge pin of this team. But Tommy, in your opinion, am I overblowing Anastasi being as bad as he is, or do you see that as an actual problem for this Piacenza team?
I mean, I would be glad to say no, but I mean, we have a saying in Italy that says 3 hints kind of make a proof. So, I mean, he failed kind of badly in the last season. It's
spectacularly bad.
Yeah, I mean,
but not only that, that's 2 season failures in a row. The year before that in Warszawa, he took a Champions League team to a team that didn't even make the playoffs.
And they missed the playoffs.
Yeah, as Rob said, those weren't simple fails. Those were crashes and burns. It was spectacular failures. I mean, those are supposed to be hints towards him not being fit for being a coach to a contender. That's true. But I think Piacenza is sort of like a smaller Perugia, meaning that since they came back to Superlega, they started. I think they were the second biggest spenders after Perugia, and they are owned by a gas company, so of course money is not an issue from them. And I mean, we saw their transfer season, the past couple of seasons, they brought a lot of big names. And maybe they are feeling their owner, their management may not be as intrusive as the Circi is, but they still, I think they're still pretty vocal in their in the way they can deliver the pressure to the team. If you remember, last year Bernardi was sacked mid-season. I mean,
that was one of the happiest days in the history of this channel. We celebrated that like nothing else.
Poor guy, he's now coaching the women. And well, anyway, I mean, this is another club in which there's a lot of pressure, in which succeeding is not an easy task, and that takes a toll, of course. I think my main concerns are Leal and Simon still being healthy. I mean, will they still be able to deliver the way they used to? Because if you look at, I mean, they have quite a nice roster, but it's not that deep as it might look. I mean, if Leal starts underperforming, who's going to come up? Recne has been kind of a disappointment in the last.
Very much so. He's had a bad 2 years, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, he was a very hot prospect, but he had a very bad couple of years. And if you look at the middles, I mean, yeah, Rich was one of the very few guys to stand out in Siena, but I mean, it was Siena. I mean, he's not going to be the guy who was able to take Simon's place. I mean, I'm fairly confident about Simon. I mean, he's a sort of a Kaczynski, meaning he's supposed to get older and sloppier. He doesn't. I mean, maybe being a middle is easier, but I mean, he's still a very, very high level middle, despite his what is it, 36,
35 or 6, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it may be easier for a middle, but he's still, I mean, an elite middle at his age. So I'm fairly confident he will not drop his level significantly. I have much more doubts about Leal because if I hear correctly, he's not exactly a role model of professionalism. So
that
so
is more
yeah,
than fair. More than
I
fair.
mean, even without thinking about the famous traffic kick accident, I mean, he's not really a very professional player. So I see him having a drop in performance way more than Simone.
And there's the other very notable problem with this roster is that they literally do not have a second opposite.
Yeah,
they have 5 outside hitters.
They have Gironi. Gironi is supposed to play opposite this year.
Kind of.
I mean, he's Gironi. He's not going to be the guy who goes in and saves the day.
Gironi is one slight step above Pinali in my head, and that is not.
That's a very low bar.
It is. It absolutely is. Can Yuri Romano produce for this team consistently is a question that Everett and I ask all the time. We talk about him being a big moment player, and he's very good in big moments, and then he's terrible in when the moments don't matter quite as much. Now, Piacenza did win the Coppa Italia last year. It's worth pointing that out. They did that on record-breakingly great serving. For 2 matches, they were absolutely unbelievable from the service line. And like we said at the time, that's not super sustainable. So they while they did have a pretty successful playoff, I mean, they're going to go play Champions League next year. Do I see them as a legitimate Scudetto contender? No. I think that when one little crack shows up in this team, it's going to burst open into a flood, very similar to Perugia last year, because Anastasi's job last year was to just stay out of the way. And he did that until that first loss, until that first crack appeared for Perugia, and then it was an absolute disaster, a disaster of epic proportions the rest of the way. This Piacenza team has more apparent cracks from the beginning, especially if the wrong player gets hurt. If Yandi Leal gets hurt, this team is screwed. If Robert Landi Simone gets hurt, Romy Alonso can play for him, and I think that is capable because Everett and I are both very high on Alonso. But if Leal or Romano or Blizzard, God forbid, if Antoine Blizzard gets hurt, this team's dead. That's very concerning.
This team is going to waffle through the regular season.
Yeah.
Like this team is going to boogie board through the regular season. There's going to be some ups. There's going to be some downs. There's going to be some good times. There's going to be some bad times.
And they're playing Champions League in the middle of that.
Boy, that'll be a lot. It really depends. Do we know the pools yet for Champions League? I get that. That's something
we do, but yeah, not worth bringing up right now.
This team has the potential to be great. It really, really does, right? Like, if this team is rolling, this team could be one of the best teams in the league. But it's just that consistency. Would have liked to have seen them bring in someone just to kind of add to it, but I don't really know who.
They didn't,
Andringa, Fabio Rizzi, no one that they really brought in. I mean, they didn't really lose anyone, like Dover and Chester and Basic, whatever, really doesn't matter. But if they wanted to take a step forward, I wanted to see an addition, maybe a third outside that could make the mark, but I guess there's just not enough guys out there. So we'll see how serious this team takes it. We'll see how Anastasi can do.
I think a pretty good summary is we talked about Verona being a boom or bust team. And if Verona's boom is 4th and their bust is 9th, I would say Piacenza's boom is 1st and their bust is 8th. I think their window overall is higher in average magnitude, but it's just as wide.
They're going to win some games just because they're them, but they're going to lose some games because they just don't give a shit.
Sure.
Right.
Probably.
Yep. Absolutely. And they're going to have to play Champions League in the middle of that. So you can expect some dumpster fire games, and you can expect some games where they might beat Perugia or whatever. So we'll see. Anything else about Piacenza?
No, I think that's it.
2 teams left. First is Cucine Lube Civitanova, one of the great programs of all time. It looked like last year they were going to take a step back in terms of on-paper talent, and yet still they made it all the way to the finals, and they pushed Trentino to 5 matches very impressively. So the problem this year is the foreigner limit. They have got a gigantic issue with the foreigner limit this year. Really, the only change they made is swapping Gabi Garcia Fernandez for Addis Lagumja, which objectively is a huge upgrade. I mean, Lagumja is terrific, and he's a guy that you have to start at opposite just all the time. The problem is now you have a foreign setter, a foreign middle, and all of your promising outside hitters are foreign. So this is an exercise of, can you once again convince Ivan Zaitsev for like the 10th time in his career to play out of position for the good of the team? Because the only way this team can be competitive is if Zaitsev is willing to play outside hitter. Because with Mattia Botolo, I unfortunately just don't really see it like day in and day out at the level of Lube Civitanova. Other than that, they're the same. I mean, DeCecco is the man. You still have Anzani, whose health seems to be a bit of an issue. Balasso is the best Italian libero. And then Chinese is excellent. So
it last year it worked so well with Ivan, like Zaitsev playing on like lining up on the left, but more or less hitting on the right, and Nikolov, lining up on the right, but still hitting on the left and just not passing. I don't think you can do that as much as with Lagumja. Lagumja is a traditional right side. He's a traditional opposite. I don't know if Zaitsev is going to want to play left side full time like that, but you have to have him on the court. Right, like you have to have him on the court. Otherwise, you're going with Diamantini in the middle over Chinese, and then
or Botolo.
Yeah, but even then, like there's just so many questions to this. If there's one team that I could think that can figure it out, it is Lube and it is Blengini. At the helm. They like last year we kind of wrote them off, especially at the beginning of the season, and they really brought themselves back. So I think this is going to be very, very interesting. Like, did I expect Lube? Like last year during the regular season, Rob, we'd be like, is Lube going to make the finals? No. And they ended up doing it. They ended up making it happen. So there's so many things that could happen here.
Lube overperforms a lot. Tommy, what do you think?
You guys pretty much said everything. I'd just like to remember that it's not the first time that Lube messes up with the foreigners. I remember in the 2016
when they forgot that Grebenikov was going to count against the limit or something like that.
Exactly, and they used him as an outside hitter for the back row rotation because they couldn't play him as a foreign libero. So yeah, I mean that. I completely agree with you. This Italian puzzle is kind of a mess. I will assure you, Zaitsev, at least on paper, said many times that he's willing to play on the left, that it's not an issue anymore for him, that for the good of the team, he will do it, no problem about it. I think he also said that he plans to prolong his career by playing on the left. So yeah, he's going to play on the left. I have very few doubts about it. The doubts I have are the ones you expressed. I mean, they will be forced to bench one between Yant, Nikolov, and Lagumja, and Yant or Nikolov Nikolov is probably the most likely candidate. There's no way you're going to bench Lagumja, and probably Yant is more Superlega ready than Nikolov right now. I'm not really high on their bench. I think their roster is less deep than other season, especially on the middle position, as you guys pointed out, because yes, Chinese, of course, is a great middle, no question about him. Anzani played good games in the last season, but it depends if he can be back on full health, because both Diamantini and who's the fourth middle, Larizza did good at Taranto last season, but he's not on Lube level. No. And we also I'm also curious about how Balazzo will fare, because last season he was good, but not that good. Maybe was like the fifth best middle in terms of receiving efficiency, and probably is a bit low for him. And he didn't play a spectacular European Championship, so he needs to have a bounce back season also, because there is no question he's going to be the starting libero of the national team, but it's the pre-Olympic season, so he's going to have all the motivation to do well. He doesn't want a guy like Scanferla, for example, to have an outstanding season, and maybe the Georgie starts to mix things up. He wants to perform. He wants to, if Italy goes to Paris, of course, because it's not It's not 100% sure.
Let's be serious. Italy's going to Paris.
Likely, but not surely.
Thank you for not assuming. Yeah, I agree that people in the chat are saying that Nikolov has to start. I completely disagree with that. Marlon Yant is a substantially better, but more SuperLega ready, like Tommy said, right this second. You can't bench Marlon Yant. If he's healthy, he is far too good. And in all of Lube's, like the Scudetto run 2 years ago, the playoff run last year, his summer for Cuba, once they changed coaches, like when Everett and I saw him at Norsica, he looked incredible.
Yeah.
Like incredible, like top 10 outside hitter in the world, incredible. And Nikolov just cannot pass the ball. So it's a no-brainer to start Yant over him. And it's a no-brainer to start Zaitsev over Botolo if, like you say, Tommy, Zaitsev is willing to play on the left side. So this starting 7 that we have on the screen is what they're going to go with if everybody's healthy and they're ready to go. This team will be very good. I mean, this is Lube Civitanova we're talking about. I think the question with them is always, can they win a Scudetto? And we have written them off the last couple of years. They did win it 2 years ago. They went to the final last year. I'll never doubt Lube Civitanova because Blangini is a genius and the perfect coach for this team. Would I pick them right now to win the Scudetto? No, I wouldn't. I think I'll still put them about third, behind probably Perugia and Trentino if paper doesn't crash and burn like the last couple of years. But Lube is Lube. Lube is extremely good. They always are.
Yeah. Never bet against Lube, but yeah, I would agree with on paper, they are the third best team, but as you said, never bet against Lube.
I honestly think there's not that much more to say about them.
No. Keep it moving. On to the last one.
Let's move on to our defending champions. Finally, after several years of being sort of a bridesmaid, they finished second place in a million different things, Champions League, Scudetto, all that. Itas Trentino finally won a Scudetto for the first time in several years, so congratulations to them. They lose Angelo Lorenzetti, who is able to be pulled away by Gino Circi's checkbook. So the new coach is this Fabio Soli guy. Other than that, the only real change is they replace Matej Kaziski with Kamil Ryklitsky, who I know that the Italian government randomly bestowed citizenship upon him a year or two ago, but according to the SuperLega website, they still say he's from Luxembourg. So
he will play as an Italian.
He will, for sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, regardless, Trentino is perfectly in compliant with the Italian quota, even as it is. They replaced Resko Lisinac with Jan Kozamernik. Lisinac has had his injury issues. Kozamernik is perfectly good. They still have Micheletto, Lavia, and Spertoli and Lorenzano at libero. Very, very, very few changes. Really, it's just Kozamernik, Ryklitsky, and the coach. Now, Tommy already alluded to earlier, you could argue that Trentino's success last year was because Perugia crumbled and got out of their way in the Scudetto playoffs. So, is it likely that Trentino is going to repeat as Scudetto champions? Let me hear both of your thoughts. Everett first.
Likely that they're going to repeat? I don't think so. I mean, I think that there's so many other teams that could be in that conversation. Is it a possibility? Absolutely. Like this is a world-class team. You've got two of the best sides in the world. You've got a top 10 setter in the world. It's really going to come down to how Soli runs this team. Like for so long, Trentino has really just gotten by. And I mean, how many of the past few seasons have they made like a Champions League finals, or they made a Scudetto final, and continuously, like, bro, they did it at one point with Namir setting, right? Like there was a point in time in COVID where they didn't have enough guys, and Namir was setting in Champions League games, and they won. So
yes, they did.
This is a team that, like, even though their roster hasn't necessarily gone through a lot of change, it's still gone through a lot of change. You lose arguably your veteran, your biggest veteran, and one of your biggest leaders in the room in Matej Kaczynski. You lose a guy like Srećko Lisinac, and you lose your longtime setter who has built this team to what it is. So yeah, I think this team is going to go through a lot of changes, and I'm really interested to see how Soli can manage that. So no, I don't think that they're going to win another Scudetto. I think they're going to be Trentino solid, but no, I don't think they're going to win.
Yeah, I would agree with Everett. It's going to be very interesting to see how Soli will fare. It's going to be his first job as a high-end team head coach. I mean, he was, I think he was second in command in Modena for a while because he's from Modena. He was also Ricardo Garcia's backup setter back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And he seemed to be on an upward part of his career when he coached Monza, but then it went terribly bad for him. He was sacked and he was replaced, but his second, Mr. Ekeli, who is still at the day Monza's head coach, who did fairly well. So it's going to be his maybe not first, but it's the first time to be as a very first tier coach, but not the first time he has a good team. And so it will be the first. Also, the first post Lorenzetti year after I think it was 7th season with Trento, so it's still going to be a big change. I agree with Rob. Kozamernik is a very good replacement for Lizinac. I'm really high on Kozamernik. He's a very complete middle, and he has a very, very nasty serve. It may look, when he does it, it looks like a very normal serve, but it's so much tricky to pass. It's a very tricky serve, and we'll see about Riklički. Riklički comes from a couple of seasons in which he was like third option in Perugia, and it's something that is not really usual for an opposite. And we will see how we will fit in this Trento system. Remember that Trento often played with a very singular three outside scheme. Sometimes Lavia was playing on the right, sometimes Kaziski. Now the Riklički is much more like a traditional opposite, so he will play on the right, no question about it, and Lavia will play on the left, no question about it. And I mentioned him because Lavia, I think, is going to be the key point for Trento. Lavia's last season was not as spectacular as the season before when he played out of his mind. Even in the national team, he was a real factor. Last year was a bit sloppier, and he was covered by Kaziski's exceptional performance. So he and Micheletto pretty much hid the fact that Lavia wasn't playing as good. But this season, Trento needs the best Lavia. Otherwise, I don't see them defending the Scudetto.
I do think that Riklički, as much as I don't particularly like him that much as a player, as an elite level opposite, playstyle wise, this makes sense.
Yeah,
his playstyle does make sense for the way that Trentino has run things, and we've talked about Trentino as being the closest thing to an Italian Zaxa in terms of quality of organization, top to bottom, and encouraging and building continuity year over year, and having that defined identity and play style that they build upon, and that they don't just like go and spend money every offseason and build a brand new team. They do keep things consistent year over year. I think that will continue even with the new coach, because Spertoli, Micheletto, and Lavia are the engines of that, and Pedrasinin as well. Like that leadership is really valuable. I think Kozamernik will fit in just fine. Riklički's play style will fit in just fine, and he's not like the most vocal guy or the guy that like demands the ball all that much. So I think this team will look very similar to the last couple of years. I actually don't think they're going to undergo that much change. But what's their ceiling? Do they have the ceiling of being a Scudetto team? Probably not. But they have a very, very high floor. There is no way they finish below fourth. No way they finish below fourth.
Very unlikely.
No. I think, honestly, I think this team could make the finals again.
Sure.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't surprise me at all. It just depends on the bracket draw that they get. But will Perugia crash and burn out of their way again? Will they be able to beat Lube in a final if they get there again? Like there's a whole lot of ifs, and especially with last year's playoff being as chaotic as it was, it's very difficult to project another Scudetto winner. What we can say for sure is that Trentino is going to be very good. But with that said, gentlemen, I think the last thing we got to do here before we let Tommy go to bed finally, I think we got to pick it. I think we got to pick our Scudetto champion. We did it yesterday for the Plusliga, which is similarly kind of wide open at the top. There's a lot of good teams in Poland. There's a lot of good teams in Italy. Of all those good teams, Everett, who's your pick to win the Scudetto in 2024?
I'm going with Perugia. Like if it doesn't happen this year, it doesn't happen this year. Like just blow up the team, blow up the club. Like you've done everything. It's clearly just not in your wheelhouse. It has to be Perugia.
Tommy,
I quote Everett 100%.
You?
I was about to pick Perugia too, but now I feel like I can't. Oh man. I mean, I threw a Hail Mary yesterday, and I picked Xavierce to win the Plus Liga. I'm gonna throw a Hail Mary again. I'm gonna pick Lube Civitanova.
Ooh,
Okay.
nice
All
one.
right.
I'm gonna pick Lube. They somehow seem to flip a switch at playoff time, and I think that they're again the Red Seas of Scudetto chaos might part for them to walk through when it comes to playoff time. We'll see. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's a show, a very long preview. The Scudetto season starts this weekend. Modena versus Milano, Taranto versus Verona, Cisterna versus Trentino, Lube versus Monza, Piacenza versus Padova, and Perugia versus Catania. Oh, man, that's going to be quite the hour in a shower to start the season. My goodness. Yeah. All of those are this Sunday, October 22nd. You can watch all of them on Volleyball World TV worldwide or various places if you are in Italy. TommyBlizzard, we can't thank you enough, my friend. Thank you for being one of our OG members of the Volleyball Source community.
Thank you guys for having me.
Coming on another year to spit some expertise. Have a great season, my friend. We're looking forward to talking in the Discord.
Thank you. One last question, since we failed to mention it in the Trentino roster. Final question: Nelly or Pinali?
Oh, Nelly.
Neither.
Nelly's bigger. They're the
5
same
players on the court.
Great question, Tommy. If you stretched Pinali out about 10 centimeters and added about 10 kilograms, you get Nelly, and I'll take that.
Okay, fair enough.
Oh man, now you're making me angry to end the show. Horrible. Thank you both. Thank you, Everett. Thank you, Tommy. Thank you all for watching. Enjoy the start of the Scudetto season this weekend, and we'll be back next week on the 9x9 to talk about everything that happens.
Yeah.
Peace.
Follow Volleyball Source.
Thank you, Tommy.